Chapter 1 began with Prince Willard Arklayson calling Remilia Rosagraupner by name before declaring, with his authority as the future king, that he was annulling their engagement. He declared that he could not possibly accept someone who had horribly abused the Star Maiden and refused to show any remorse for the crime as his future queen. Remilia observed that the situation was not good and thought that she had done everything she could, yet things had still turned out this way. Prince Willard, along with David and Stefan, looked on with troubled expressions. As if all the blood had drained from her body, Remilia recalled losing consciousness. Her eyes snapped open as she returned to the present. Prince Willard asked whether she had anything to say for herself. Remilia thought that more than 10 years had passed since she had last moved her fingertips, so she could not afford to appear unsightly now. She then swore upon her own name that she would not utter a falsehood by confessing to a crime she had not committed. Recalling the wonderful reputation Emmy had built as a duke's daughter, Remilia Rosagraupner resolved that she would never allow it to be disgraced. Standing before the gathered nobles, she declared that she would not forgive any of them. The story then returned to when Remilia was a child. She awoke breathing heavily and reached for water, only to find that none was nearby. She thought that she needed to get some and change her clothes. Burning with a high fever, she attempted to walk but lost consciousness. When she awoke again, she found herself in a strange place and wondered where exactly she was. A window opened, and when she looked into it, she saw a little girl who looked exactly like her. She recognized that it was herself. Remilia wondered what this place was and noted that it was not the hospital. She noticed that her hand looked like a child's, that her hair was now blonde, and reacted in shock as she realized what it meant. Within the dark space, the other Remilia declared that the body before her belonged to her and demanded that it be returned at once, denouncing the other figure as a boor, miscreant, rogue, and reprobate. She wondered whether the other could not even see her and felt as though her entire existence had been stolen away. The figure called out for her father, mother, and sister before crying in sorrow that she was sorry for dying. The Remilia within the dark space stared ahead in shock as she was drawn into a scattering of light. Consciousness, memories, and emotions flowed into Remilia. She sat up in the room, acknowledged what had happened, and wondered in confusion what on earth had taken place. She demanded that what was hers be returned, but her thoughts soon turned to the little girl whose body this was, and she hoped that she was safe. Kneeling within the light, Remilia cursed whatever god or evil spirit had brought this upon her. Yet when it came to Emmy, who had wept over her family's grief rather than her own death, Emmy was the only one Remilia could forgive. This was something Remilia had never known before. It was to love or to be loved. She felt that something remained within the soul of the one who had worried for her, within Emmy's life, and within the memories of the days that person had lived. Emmy continued to weep bitterly, repeatedly apologizing for dying. Remilia lay in bed, apologizing for making Emmy suffer. The feeling within her was thick and heavy, and she admitted that it could not be helped because she loved Emmy. After spending several days feeling nothing but Emmy's emotions flowing through her, Remilia wandered through the library in search of words such as Japan, university, and Emmy. She gradually realized that she could freely browse through Emmy's memories, learning about Emmy's family as well as countless stories, cultures, and traditions. She found it far more enjoyable than spending every day alone at home as she had before and decided that she would take whatever copies Emmy possessed. Just as it seemed they were both growing accustomed to their new lives, something unexpected happened. Remilia reacted in shock, wondering what had just taken place. Looking at her reflection, she realized that she truly looked like the villainous Remilia Rosagraupner and that, when people spoke the name Remilia, they were referring to her. She wondered if it was really true that she had been reincarnated as Remilia. She recalled that, during a visit to the royal palace, Emmy had become engaged to the second prince, Willard. It was as though the coincidences had suddenly begun to pile up. Emmy carefully questioned her mother in a way that would not earn her a scolding. When she asked about the names of young nobles she had not yet been taught, her mother smiled with satisfaction. In truth, however, Emmy's heart was nearly pounding out of her chest, and the tips of her fingers and toes had turned cold. Through Emmy's memories, Remilia also learned that this world originated from a story Emmy knew. In that story, Emmy knew Remilia as the most pitiful and unfortunate girl. Despite possessing near limitless magical potential, Remilia's parents regarded her as little more than a tool for political marriage. Longing for the affection she had never received as a child, she tried to force her fiancé, Willard, to give it to her, and he came to hate her for it. From the royal family's perspective, they merely wished to combine that magical potential with the bloodline descended from heroes. Their engagement was, bluntly, little more than the kind of selective breeding practiced on a farm. Then the Star Maiden, a girl with the ability to use purification magic, arrived at the academy, and the countdown to Remilia's doom began. The girl grew close to many of the boys at the academy while improving her abilities before setting out to save the world from destruction. The villain destined to bring about that destruction was none other than Remilia, who sought to destroy the very world that had deprived her of love. She was a loser in love who succumbed to obsession and ultimately perished because of it. Emmy cried out Remilia's name as she realized that Remilia had simply been lonely. She wondered whether Remilia could ever find happiness and wished to cook delicious meals for her and let her sleep in a warm, comfortable bed. She considered Remilia her favorite character and felt profound pity for her. Remilia was glad that Emmy had loved her all the same. Emmy's real family had always remained with her in her memories, so she had never truly minded the lack of love from her parents. She wondered whether things could have been different. They could have stayed together, held hands, braided each other's hair, read stories together, and shared meals. Emmy believed that, if only they could have been sisters, she would never have allowed Remilia to become so lonely. The woman who cursed the world because it refused to love her was the pitiful and lonely girl, Remilia Rosa Graupner. Emmy resolved that such a girl would never come to exist in this world. Sitting at her desk, she vowed to do her very best and swore that she would absolutely make Remilia the happiest girl in the world. She would devote herself to the happiness of the villainess, Remilia. The following day, Emmy, now in Remilia's body, resolved that she would never bring about the world's destruction herself. However, even if the demon lord were never defeated, the world was doomed regardless, so she concluded that she had to become stronger. She was uncertain whether the Star Maiden would even appear and wondered if she could truly train in real life the same way she had in the game. Unable to rely on simply mashing buttons, she felt anxious. She stood before a vast collection of magical materials. She learned that once an item disappeared from her inventory, she could no longer use it. Wondering whether grinding the materials into powder and applying them to herself would allow her to absorb their magical power, she began a series of experiments. Although the ground remains retained magical potential, they failed to increase her own magical power. She continued experimenting for months and eventually discovered that different combinations of materials could alter their magical properties. The original Remilia, watching from within, observed Emmy panic after wasting materials worth 300,000 gold. At last, as a final resort, Emmy mixed the substance with water and drank it. She found its power incredible despite its revolting taste, comparing it to herbal remedies made from unpleasant ingredients such as worms and limestone powder. She felt the magical energy within her suddenly become denser, giving her finer senses and greater control over it. Afterward, Emmy fought monsters day and night, stopping only to recover from her injuries. What she sought were the demon shards carried by those monsters, which could be refined into mana stones. In the game, mana stones were used for the gacha to obtain new companions and recover stamina. In this world, crushing them against one's body restored magical power and removed fatigue. On rare occasions, however, they could also be used in prayer to receive an oracle from the gods, making it heretical to squander such a precious substance merely for training. As the daughter of a duke, Emmy spent every bit of money at her disposal to acquire demon shards and magical materials, both to increase her magical power and to improve her own ability to wield it. One night, a battle broke out between a group of bandits and the guards escorting a transport. The guards called out to protect their lord. One of the bandits remarked that it had been a long time since they had caught such a valuable target and intended to slaughter everyone there like pigs. As the battle continued, the lord noted that the bandits had already broken through to that point but took comfort in knowing that Prince Claude was safe at home, resolving that he would not die in such a place. Suddenly, someone warned him of danger behind him while another cried out in frustration. A bandit was about to stab him from behind when, in the next instant, someone arrived and eliminated every one of the bandit. The lord stood in astonishment, unable to understand what had happened. Remilia stepped forward, asked whether he was injured, and addressed him as her uncle. He was surprised to see her. Emmy, whose magical talent had truly blossomed, prevented Claude's father from dying at the hands of the bandits, just as had occurred in the original plot. Remilia noted that events had unfolded exactly as they had in the game and, though still trembling, was glad that she had managed to help. However, Emmy's efforts ultimately came to nothing. Not long afterward, Claude's father died during a major epidemic that swept across the country. Thus, just as in the game, Claude was adopted into the main family as her stepbrother. Emmy grew fearful of the relentless power of the plot. Even so, the future had changed, if only slightly. In this world, the rift between Claude and his father had been healed before the latter's death. Claude had always believed that his father despised him for causing his mother's death in childbirth, which was why he had treated his son so coldly. As a result, Claude had grown into a gloomy and joyless boy. In truth, his father had spent years struggling with devastating floods and marauding bandits. He had simply been a man overwhelmed by endless responsibilities, not someone who neglected his son out of resentment over his wife's death. In the game, the Star Maiden discovered this truth while searching through the deceased Viscount's old office and later shared the letters she found with Claude. In those letters, his father apologized for never being able to remain by his son's side because of the burdens of his duties. In this world, however, the Viscount was not killed during the bandit raid. Instead, he personally gave the letter to Claude, allowing the two to become as close as father and son. Although Claude was consumed by grief after the funeral, he gradually recovered as Emmy showered him with affection. He grew into the cheerful young boy who adored the stepsister who cared for him. Emmy told him that he was her precious little brother. Though he never revealed it, Claude eventually developed feelings for Emmy despite the fact that she already had a fiancé. In this way, Emmy also dispelled the darkness within the hearts of the main characters, just as the Star Maiden had done in the game. The first was David, a boy from a knightly family who harbored a deep inferiority complex toward his elder brother, the man known as the God of the Sword. David possessed a unique style of fighting that only he could use. In the game, the Star Maiden had been the only person to recognize his talent as a swordsman. The David of this world also struggled with overwhelming feelings of inferiority. After someone suggested that he should learn from Emmy because her magical ability surpassed even that of many adults, David learned that she had become stronger through grueling battles against monsters and by collecting their demon shards. Taking the few demon shards he could obtain, he ran into the forest where monsters gathered. David had only ever fought opponents one-on-one before. Overwhelmed by multiple enemies, he was driven to the brink of death before Emmy, who had hurried after him, rescued him. He wondered whether she had only come to laugh at him and questioned why she had saved him. Emmy slapped him and insisted that if her friend did something dangerous, she would naturally stop him. She broke into tears, calling David an idiot and admitting that she had thought he was going to die. The two walked through the forest hand in hand. Emmy asked David why he had done something so reckless. He admitted that he did not want to lose to his older brother. Emmy acknowledged that feeling but asked what he would do after gaining the strength to surpass him. David confessed that he did not know and instead asked why she wanted to become strong. Emmy replied that she needed to remain by Prince Willard's side in order to fulfill her dream, while inwardly adding that it was for the sake of the villainess, Remilia. Emmy also saved Stefan, the son of the palace mage. Since he was not his father's heir, he had dreamed of becoming a musician, but fearing that he would never be allowed to pursue that path, he abandoned the dream. Emmy encouraged him to speak honestly with his father and told him that she believed it was wonderful to do what made him happy. Finding that courage became one turning point in Stefan's life, while another came after he heard Emmy singing songs from her previous life. Although Emmy feigned ignorance when Stefan questioned her about the song, he attempted to transcribe it by ear. After countless failed attempts, he concluded that Remilia herself must have composed the piece and nearly abandoned music in the face of what he believed to be her overwhelming talent. Once again, it was Emmy who desperately stopped him. She insisted that he absolutely had to continue making music, and praised his violin performances for having so much heart and soul that they could make her dance, cry, or even do both at once. She added that no one had ever heard of a musical magician before, that he would surely become famous, and that countless people would want to hear his music once they learned of it. Stefan explained that he had merely heard the song in a dream and could never create something like it himself. In the end, the misunderstanding surrounding Emmy's song was resolved. Stefan came to believe that, because Lady Remilia's soul was so beautiful, she had heard the voices of angels. Emmy was simply a naturally kind person who could not ignore her desire to help others. She was willing to go to any lengths for their sake. The more people she saved, the more her talent blossomed, and the more completely she embodied the ideal Lady Remilia. Because of that, however, a problem arose that had never existed in the game. Prince Willard became jealous. He apologized to Remilia, admitting that it was embarrassing but that her ability to work so hard and stand on her own feet frustrated him. He confessed that he envied how she could face every challenge and overcome it. Remilia explained that she had worked so hard because she wanted to remain by his side. She wanted to become a lady who would never embarrass him. For the first time, Willard saw his extraordinarily talented childhood friend as a young woman. Realizing that she had done all of it for his sake, he gently patted her head and admitted that he had been too slow to understand, asking her to forgive her partner for being so thick-headed. Remilia became flustered. As she basked in those dazzling moments, she realized that they alone were enough to make her happy. When Emmy had said that she wanted to see Remilia happy, Remilia finally understood what she had truly meant. Simply watching Emmy live happily brought her greater joy than anything else. She sincerely hoped that Emmy and Willard would continue living happily together without ever breaking off their engagement. Emmy, however, admitted that she could not honestly say she was personally invested in romance. Those peaceful days came to an end when a girl approached her and asked whether she was also a reincarnator. The girl was the Star Maiden, who had just enrolled at the academy. Chapter 2 began with a group of students standing outside the academy building. One student pointed out the student council members while another reacted in surprise. One remarked that the group looked dazzling together, while another felt lucky to have seen them and noted how beautiful Lady Remilia was. One student mentioned that Lady Remilia had rescued her the other day, prompting another to react in surprise and ask for more details. The student explained that a noble had used their status to force her to do chores, but Lady Remilia had noticed the situation and told her that a teacher wanted to see her. She added that Lady Remilia had been admitted to the school based on her own results rather than her family background. Another student expressed admiration, saying Lady Remilia never lost to anyone in either academics or magic, and yet remained pure of heart. The student declared that she truly admired her. Another remarked that Lady Remilia was not only exceptional at school, as she had developed a cure for the epidemic and had also worked to distribute new hygiene measures to prevent the spread of disease. Another added that she had developed a new magical communication device and a stove that did not require fire to cook food. A third student mentioned the free school meal policy that had begun in the Graupner family territory and spread across the kingdom, allowing poor children to attend school. The student concluded that Lady Remilia was the perfect lady. A girl approached Remilia and asked whether she had heard that they were going to see something very rare that day. Remilia reacted in confusion. The girl then revealed that the Star Maiden from the fairy tales was transferring to the academy. Inside the hall, the assembled students were told that they were all familiar with the Star Maiden from the tales, the Maiden of Salvation who appeared whenever the world was close to a crisis. The speaker explained that her abilities had recently blossomed and that she had been admitted to the academy as a special case by the court before asking everyone to welcome their new classmate. Pina Blanche introduced herself as the Star Maiden. The students reacted in surprise, with some wondering if she truly existed, others questioning whether it was true that she could increase the magical power of those around her simply through prayer, while others remarked that she looked cute. One student thought that getting close to her might help him establish a connection with the court. Pina explained that she was a commoner and did not know much, but asked everyone to get along with her. Meanwhile, inside the student council room, its members discussed the unexpected arrival of the Star Maiden. Prince Willard remarked that he had never expected the Star Maiden to truly exist. One member observed that it would take Pina some time to adjust to the academy, especially since she was a commoner, so the student council should help her as much as possible. Another mentioned that the world did not seem to be facing any kind of crisis. One student noted that the last Star Maiden had appeared over 300 years ago, while another agreed that Pina was an incredible person but also rather cute. Another remarked that the Star Maiden was meant to be a national icon but wondered whether she was involved in politics at all. Remilia realized that the Star Maiden had truly arrived, which meant the real plot was about to begin. Pina entered the student council room and remarked that the room was plainer than she had expected. She greeted everyone and introduced herself as the Star Maiden, Pina. Remilia frowned as Prince Willard asked what she was doing there. Pina suddenly screamed before rushing over to embrace Prince Willard. The rest of the group reacted in shock at her bold behavior. Pina excitedly expressed her disbelief that Willard truly existed and revealed that she had always wanted to meet the real one. Remilia observed that Pina was somehow a little different. Prince Willard gently pushed Pina away and explained that, whether this was simply how commoners greeted one another or not, it was not considered proper to hug a man who already had a fiancée. Pina reacted in confusion. Prince Willard further explained that, as a member of royalty, he had to be even more prudent than most people. Claude remarked that if Pina was a fan of the Crown Prince, she should have known better than anyone that he already had a fiancée. David remarked that Pina should leave before someone showed her the door more rudely. Stefan stated that although he would not pretend to understand what it was like to be the Star Maiden, she should at least learn basic manners if she intended to be a student at the academy. Someone asked whether Remilia was all right, and Remilia replied that she was fine. Pina stood stunned in silence before apologizing, admitting that she had become too excited. She stated that she would return later before leaving the room. Not long afterward, Remilia left the room and walked along the corridor. She thought that, since the player decided the Star Maiden's actions in the game, perhaps Pina's real personality did not match the version from the game at all. Pina suddenly called out to Remilia and asked whether she was also a reincarnator. Remilia reacted in confusion. Pina told her not to play dumb and asked whether she was the villainess Remilia. She demanded to know why Remilia was so close to Prince Will, as that did not match the game at all. Remilia reacted uncertainly. Pina continued, saying that Remilia had never been meant to be close to Claude, David, Stefan, or anyone else, yet all of them now favored her. She called Remilia awful, accusing her of knowing about the game since childhood and using that knowledge to cheat. Remilia remained silent. Pina went on to accuse her of being nothing more than a villainess trying to build a reverse harem. When Remilia attempted to speak, Pina called her gross and cheap. She questioned whether Remilia believed she could get away with such a sneaky method. Pina accused her of behaving like an antagonist who only wanted to ruin the story, insisting that the story had been meant for her before storming away. Remilia stood alone and realized that Pina was indeed from Japan as well, though she maintained that she had never intended to ruin the story. She reflected that this was her second life, and having already seen how the future unfolded, she did not act based solely on what she knew from the game. She recalled hearing people praise her as amazing and capable of anything. She also remembered when Willard had once said that she was far too free-spirited before asking for her forgiveness for being a bit thick-headed. It was true that, in the game, Prince Will was the capture target meant for the heroine, and that might have been the future that was originally intended. Although Remilia still felt uncertain, she believed that if changing events prevented people from dying or being hurt, then she had made the right choice. She decided to speak with Pina properly about everything that had already happened and what they should do from then on. She was certain they could understand one another because they were both great fans of the same story. She also believed that, since they both knew about the tragedies that would unfold, they could work together to prevent them. However, because of Pina's inherently good nature, Emmy remained optimistic, but Remilia could never bring up the subject of their previous lives while there were always so many people around. Some students had noticed Pina's impudence, while others were still astonished by the legends surrounding her. Classes ended for the day, but Remilia still could not find the right opportunity to speak with Pina. Instead, Pina approached her and called her a filthy reverse harem-aiming slut. She declared that she would never let Remilia sink her disgusting claws into Will, Claude, David, and especially not Angel before running away. Remilia watched her leave and wondered who was truly trying to sink their claws into others. From that point onward, Pina repeatedly tried to recreate scenes from the game. In Stefan's case, Pina praised him while he played the violin. She commented that it was a beautiful song and that simply hearing it made her heart flutter so much that she would not have been surprised if angels descended from heaven to listen as well. She gushed that she loved the sound of violins and could feel his kind and happy soul in every note before asking whether he understood what she meant. Stefan gave no response. Later, he shared the incident with Remilia, explaining that a strange girl had come to the music hall earlier and made him feel awful about his new composition. He explained that it had been written with a tragic motif, yet Pina had spoken about his kind and happy soul. In Claude's case, Pina approached him and asked whether he had a minute, explaining that she was wondering what he thought about the Sanandra dynasty period. Claude looked at the book she was holding before replying that, before answering, he would first like to hear her own thoughts. Pina reacted in confusion. A full minute passed, and she failed to give any answer. Later, Claude told Remilia that Pina had brought a book about a completely different kingdom, left after he ignored her for a while, and left him wondering what that had been about. In David's case, while everyone was training on the practice grounds, an instructor called everyone to attention and ordered them to begin swinging. A student complained that he could not continue. David smirked and challenged whether that was all they had. At that moment, Pina suddenly called out to Lord David. David reacted in confusion. Later, he told Remilia that Pina had simply appeared out of nowhere. Although he already knew she was strange, her actions had still surprised him. In Willard's case, Pina cried out as she fell over. The others nearby attempted to help her, but she did not respond until Willard knelt to assist her. He later told Remilia that Pina had recently begun running up to him and deliberately falling over. Unless he was the one to help her back up, she would continue lying there until he did. He admitted that he had no idea what she was thinking. Remilia observed that Pina seemed to fail at every turn. If she truly wanted the plot to mirror the original story, she should have at least tried to emulate the original Star Maiden. In the game, Stefan came to like the Star Maiden after she passionately explained exactly what she loved about his music. Believing that she truly understood his talent, Stefan gradually fell for her. Instead, Pina approached Stefan and simply remarked that his music was really pretty and that he was very talented. Stefan thanked her, but for someone who had already been invited to perform at a concert, such superficial praise carried no weight. In David's route from the game, he eventually invited the Star Maiden to the training grounds after they had built a strong relationship. However, this Star Maiden barged in whenever she pleased without caring whether anyone had invited her. The event in which the heroine was carried to the infirmary after falling had originally been caused by a jealous girl who took out her resentment on the commoner who had befriended the prince. Remilia regarded Pina as a repugnant woman and thought that, unless Pina established that premise, she should not expect events to unfold the same way as in the original story. Unlike the original, where the prince and the others were very friendly, there was no reason for anyone to become jealous of someone monopolizing their attention. No one would dare harm the Star Maiden, who was destined to become the kingdom's savior, especially not in front of the prince. Yet, little by little, something began to change. Willard gradually befriended Pina, leaving Emmy confused by his sudden shift in attitude. Concerned about the compulsive force of the original plot, she had always remained vigilant, but she concluded that it had not been enough, as Pina had likely begun taking advantage of the power of items. Pina managed to grow close to the student council, and many students noticed. A group of students spotted her and recognized her as the Star Maiden. They remarked that she had become quite close with the student council lately. One student admitted that they had once thought Pina was somewhat rude but now honestly found her cute and naive, pointing out how innocent she looked. Another added that, although Pina was the Star Maiden destined to save everyone, she was so endearing that people naturally wanted to protect her. Remilia realized that something was wrong, but by then it was already too late. The influence soon spread beyond Willard, whom Pina had been clinging to for some time. It appeared that more than half of the school had been affected by the items Pina had used. Those who had previously kept their distance from Pina because she seemed odd no longer stood by Remilia's side. Remilia watched as Pina stood surrounded by the student council and the other students. Before long, rumors about Remilia began spreading throughout the academy. Students discussed hearing rumors about Lady Graupner, including claims that she had been bullying the Star Maiden. They remarked that the rumors had spread quickly. Some claimed that, with her engagement supposedly on the verge of collapse, Remilia had begun abusing her influence in a desperate attempt to cling to her fiancé. Others questioned where the stories had come from, while more students repeated accusations that Remilia had publicly insulted Pina. The rumors escalated further, with claims that Remilia had ordered her maids to put worms into Pina's food and had even set fire to her skirt. Some insisted there was no smoke without fire, expressing disbelief that the seemingly perfect Lady Remilia could do such things before concluding that those who appeared perfect often hid a cruel side. In the early days, Pina had begun gathering followers. Emmy believed she could have dispelled any suspicion by avoiding Pina as much as possible, but that alone had never been enough against someone like Pina. Inside, Emmy desperately protested that she could not allow the situation to continue without denying the accusations. She thought that everyone had become more interested in ugly gossip than in discovering the truth for themselves. She believed the rumors could be disproven with evidence, and even considered having both herself and Pina observed directly by royal attendants or the royal family's animals. She reminded herself not to blindly trust either her maids or His Highness. Emmy was constantly wounded by malicious rumors about deeds she had never committed, and even those she had trusted gradually turned away from her. Prince Willard remarked that Pina could be a little strange, but that she was genuinely interesting. He added that she was only a commoner, so it was only natural that she had wanted to meet a prince. Remilia could only stand by and watch everything unfold. Willard expressed his hope that she and Pina could get along, explaining that they simply wanted to spend time together and nothing more. He assured Remilia that he knew she had not committed any of the acts people were accusing her of, but explained that Pina came from a different world and viewed things differently. He asked Remilia to change the way she treated Pina from then on and wondered whether she could not be kinder to Pina, if only for his sake. Then, without warning, another incident occurred, and everyone immediately blamed Remilia. They questioned why she would have said such things after seeing Pina in tears, and admitted that they had never imagined Remilia capable of behaving that way. Remilia insisted that she had done nothing of the sort and that she had not said anything at all. She pleaded for them to believe her. As misunderstandings and outright falsehoods were twisted into accepted truth, Remilia once again found herself able to do nothing but watch. The boys had known Emmy well enough that they should have understood a girl with her personality would never even dream of bullying anyone. Yet they had completely lost faith in her. They assured Pina that they had already spoken to Remilia and remarked that Remilia should not behave so jealously. Pina insisted that it was probably her own fault for being too friendly with everyone and apologized. They immediately told her that she had nothing to apologize for and declared that, if someone behaved wrongly, they would say so even if that person were a relative. Pina thanked everyone for their support. One girl encouraged Remilia to stay strong, promising that even if no one else stood beside her, she would. Remilia thanked her and wondered how she could ever repay such kindness. In reality, the girl was a traitor hiding behind the mask of a friend and had already been working with Pina for some time. She had arranged opportunities for Remilia and Pina to be alone together and had supplied Pina with Remilia's personal belongings so they could be used to frame her further. Pina remarked that she would have to be careful about where she went because she did not want her presence to spoil Lady Graupner's mood. Pina assured everyone not to worry, reminding them that their fellow commoners were on their side. One of her classmates remarked that no one knew what the awful Duke's daughter might do if she caught them. Another reassured Pina that they, as fellow commoners, would stand by her. Pina claimed that she had received a threatening letter written on the same stationery used by Lady Graupner before hesitating and suggesting that she must have been mistaken. Other students discussed the alleged threatening letters, remarking that such behavior sounded exactly like something Remilia would do. Pina possessed a talent for portraying herself as the victim. As Willard and his companions openly condemned Remilia's behavior, the contrast between the seemingly unrepentant Remilia and the poor Star Maiden, who continued to defend her, became a familiar scene throughout the academy. It soon turned into an everyday occurrence. One day, Pina and Remilia crossed paths on a staircase. Pina suddenly cried out as she fell, and Remilia instinctively reached out to catch her. As they tumbled, Pina let out a quiet laugh before screaming at the top of her lungs. Others rushed over to see what had happened. Remilia remained on the stairs with her arms still outstretched. Willard hurried over and called out to Remy. Pina tearfully accused Lady Graupner of being cruel, sobbing that, even if Remilia hated her, pushing her down the stairs had gone too far. Remilia tried to explain but could only stammer. More people gathered, concluding that the rumors had been true all along and that Lady Graupner had really pushed the Star Maiden. Some called it attempted murder while Pina continued crying that she was hurt. Remilia insisted that she had only been trying to help. Willard lifted Pina into his arms before declaring his disappointment in Remilia. The onlookers branded her a criminal, declared that someone should get rid of such a monster, and condemned her as awful. Just as in the original story, a few days later Remilia was accused of attempted murder during a royal ball and informed that her engagement would be broken off. The events had become reality. Remilia thought it utterly absurd that a scratched wrist and a sprained ankle were being treated as attempted murder. Every word Emmy spoke fell on deaf ears. Willard accused her of being a foolish woman who had dared to harm the Star Maiden. Her attempts to plead her innocence were interpreted as a lack of remorse, and as it became clear that her engagement was effectively over, Emmy fell into a pit of despair. At that moment the original Remilia awakened. Willard asked Remy whether she had anything to say for herself. Everyone looked on in confusion as Remilia suddenly seemed like a different person. She reflected that it had already been more than 10 years since she had last moved her own fingertip. She resolved that she could not afford to appear unsightly. Swearing upon her own name, she declared that she would never confess to a crime she had not committed or utter a falsehood. Willard and Pina reacted in confusion. Remilia realized that she could still feel Emmy within her, yet Emmy's spirit no longer stirred. It was as though Emmy had fallen into a deep sleep. Remilia admitted that she already missed Emmy dearly. She quietly reflected that Emmy had done nothing to deserve any of this, and that no one understood that better than she did. She swore that she would protect Emmy, just as Emmy had once saved her heart when she was young. In return, she vowed to protect the happiness that Emmy had cherished so dearly. Remilia called out to Prince Willard and asked whether His Majesty and her father were aware of his decision. Willard replied that they were and that he would never make such an unreasonable decision on his own. Remilia pointed out that she had not been informed of anything until then and asked whether she was not even permitted to be heard on the matter. Willard questioned whether she intended to ignore all the evidence that had already been presented against her. He listed testimony from the children of noble families who had allegedly been coerced into committing crimes on her behalf, threatening letters written on stationery bearing her coat of arms, sworn testimony from 2 of her maids and 3 of her guards, and the attempted murder that everyone had supposedly witnessed only days earlier. He asked whether she truly believed she could escape responsibility. Remilia stated that every piece of evidence had been maliciously fabricated and that she had nothing more to say beyond that. Willard remarked that she simply did not know when to give up and admitted that he had always believed she was smarter than this. He explained that they had known each other for many years and, for the sake of whatever feelings he still held for her, he was willing to forgive her if she sincerely showed remorse, apologized to the Star Maiden, and mended her ways. Remilia refused outright, once again declaring that every accusation was nothing more than a malicious fabrication. Willard looked at her with a stern expression. Remilia thought that, if he still chose to believe the Star Maiden over her after everything they had shared, there was no point wasting any more words on him. She resolved to continue wearing her meek mask for the time being. Willard clicked his tongue before ordering the guards to escort her away. Later, a knock sounded at the door. Remilia stood before her father and the king. The king explained that the evening had been intended to serve both as the Star Maiden's social debut and as an important occasion for Remilia. He revealed that, had Remilia shown remorse and apologized to the Star Maiden, he had intended to preserve the engagement. He lamented that events had turned out this way, as he had genuinely looked forward to having Remilia as his daughter-in-law. Now that matters had reached this point, he asked whether she had anything she wished to say. Remilia recalled that, when she had sworn her engagement oath to a member of the royal family, she had been offered the services of an unseen guardian who would watch over her from the shadows. She reflected that she regretted declining that offer once the Star Maiden had begun approaching Prince Willard. Remilia acknowledged that her punishment would be confinement to the Graupner family's estates while retaining her title and declared that she accepted that punishment completely. She then requested that someone now be assigned to watch over her from the shadows. Her father replied that he would consider the request. Remilia expressed her gratitude even for that much. With this, she understood that she had lost all usefulness as a pawn in her father's eyes. As far as that evening was concerned, his original plan had merely been to stage a public accusation before quietly resolving everything once she apologized. The accusations against Remilia had continued to mount, backed by influential voices until even royal authority could no longer silence the noble's outrage. However, he had clearly never expected that Remilia would not apologize at all and would instead calmly accept the dissolution of her engagement. Remilia recognized that she was now playing with an empty hand. The only move available to her was to withdraw for the time being. She thought of every member of the vulgar mob that had turned against her and resolved to take revenge on every filthy traitor who had harmed Emmy. Above all, her thoughts settled on one girl. She vowed that Pina alone would be forced to live through the hell on earth that she herself would weave. For driving her beloved Emmy into such despair, Remilia believed that not even death would be enough to atone for that sin. To achieve that goal, she already knew what she had to do first. Suddenly, the door was slammed open, and her father announced his arrival. he remarked that she had created an utterly ridiculous mess. Remilia welcomed her father. He immediately ordered her to remain silent, declaring that he no longer considered her his daughter. He informed her that she would soon be moved to the Graupner family's countryside estate, where he would never have to see her face again. Remilia calmly replied that she was well aware. She then stated that she had one request. Her father curtly told her to speak. Remilia asked to be granted full authority over the management of the countryside estate. He pointed out that it was nothing more than barren rural land with no real value and explained that its isolation was precisely why she was being confined there. Remilia explained that she simply wished to create a comfortable place to live. She added that having to seek his approval for every minor matter involving maintenance or personnel would only waste Duke Graupner's valuable time. She further stated that she was not asking for such authority as an act of charity. In exchange, Remilia offered him the full and exclusive rights to every product she had developed so far. Her father reacted in surprise and questioned what she had just said. Inwardly, Remilia resolved not to let the royalties from the products Emmy had created using her knowledge go to waste. She proposed that, if he covered the initial costs of her relocation, she would leave the following day and never have anything to do with the Graupner household again. Her father considered that, with the engagement now broken, Remilia no longer had any value to him. The taxes collected from the handful of villagers living in that remote territory were insignificant compared to the profits he would gain from monopolizing her inventions. Accepting the proposal, he instructed Remilia to have the transfer of rights prepared for him first thing the next morning. Remilia thanked him sincerely. She regarded the agreement as a promising beginning, sufficient to lay the foundation for her revenge. To restore the honor of herself, Remilia the Villainess, she resolved to take revenge on every one of the traitors and claim happiness for herself. She swore that she would become happy. Remilia reflected that the version of herself in the game had relied on crows, but she considered spiders to be far more practical and appropriate. She commanded the spiders to become her hands and feet, her eyes and ears, then ordered them to spread out and reveal the world to her. Chapter 3 opened with a large manor standing atop a hill, surrounded by trees and distant mountains, while a winding path stretched across the countryside. Remilia held a mana stone between her fingers, observing it closely as light glimmered around it. Later, she sat in a room lined with tall bookshelves, sipping from a cup while looking at a pile of rough stones resting on the table before her. She noted that, when it came to refining mana stones, she believed that amount would be sufficient. Remilia sat at her table as spiders moved across the room, spinning webs that formed magical patterns. Through them, she observed the 2 royal guards assigned to watch her in the garden, the fools at the academy, and the back streets of the capital. At last, she found the door she had been searching for. Remilia stepped into an elaborate magical circle, prepared to depart. She silently thanked teleportation magic for its blissful ignorance, and remarked that the 2 guards would serve perfectly in reinforcing her alibi. She teleported to another location and walked through a stone corridor. She reflected that it would be unfair to call the guards incompetent, as it was simply abnormal for someone to cast teleportation magic alone. She recalled that she had been bestowed with extraordinary abilities and unique skills solely so she could stand in the hero's way as the official cheat villain, Remilia. Now that she had returned to her own body, she resolved to show everyone the true power of a villainess. It would not be the power of the kind Emmy or the lonely Remilia, but the power of a Remilia who had experienced what it meant to be loved. She silently asked Emmy to wait for her and vowed to create a world to which Emmy could return with peace of mind. The following morning, the estate staff stood before Remilia with uncertain expressions. One maid asked whether the money belonged to Remilia herself. Remilia explained that it was severance pay and that she had also prepared letters of recommendation for all of them. The staff revealed that they had only recently been hired from a neighboring village by her father to look after her. Remilia acknowledged that she knew this but explained that she had been falsely accused in the capital before being banished there by the new lover of her former fiancé, the crown prince. She added that, if they remained with her, they would only become caught up in the misfortune surrounding her, so the least she could do was help them find new places to work. The staff reacted with sorrow. Later, Remilia left the manor alone while they wept behind her. One of the guards remarked that he had wondered what kind of evil noblewoman Remilia might be, but concluded that rumors could not be trusted because she had seemed kind and pure after all. The other guards stopped him and reminded him that they had been ordered by the royal palace to keep the estate under surveillance. One of them then questioned why all of the servants were leaving with so much luggage. Meanwhile, at the estate, Remilia extended her hand and cast a spell. She declared that the barrier was complete and noted that it should allow everything to proceed smoothly. She reflected that tears were the cheapest currency and was certain the servants would spread word of her once they returned to their village. She considered it important to spread the truth in remote areas beyond the reach of royal influence. At the same time, she acknowledged that she could not trust anyone enough to keep them close, as they might merely be someone else's pawns. Her stomach suddenly rumbled, catching her by surprise. She realized that, if she did not eat, she would simply go hungry. Until then, Emmy's meals had also sustained her, causing her to forget about such things. Remilia cooked bacon and an egg in a frying pan before skillfully flipping them onto a pancake. She placed the finished meal onto a plate, noting that bacon and egg on a pancake had been Emmy's favorite. She cut off a piece with a fork and knife before taking a bite. She resolved to eat all of Emmy's favorite foods and, just as Emmy had nurtured her all those years, she would ensure that Emmy could always enjoy those favorites as well. Remilia sat alone in the spacious living room, quietly looking around the empty manor. She observed how silent it was. At that moment, she reflected that only she and Emmy remained in the mansion and that she had never felt so at peace. She washed the laundry and cleaned the rooms, believing that Emmy's memories and experiences were enough for her to live by. She also tended the plants in the garden, noting that it was thanks to Emmy's hard work that she possessed so many materials for producing mana stones. She silently asked Emmy to wait for her and vowed not to let any of Emmy's efforts go to waste. Once again, she swore to create a world that Emmy could return to with peace of mind. After some time, Remilia walked through a vast, well-stocked workshop lined with shelves, jars and magical tools. Among the displays, she noticed an item labeled charm perfume. She examined it closely before suddenly realizing what it was. A merchant assumed she was looking for a perfume to improve her love life and explained that anyone who spent time around its wearer would gradually come to like them more. Remilia confirmed that it was indeed the premium game item known as charm perfume. The merchant added that the ideal combination was to use it together with a love potion, which only lasted about a month but worked well when paired with the perfume. Remilia immediately recognized the love potion as another premium shop item capable of further improving the target's opinion after they consumed it. She concluded that the Star Maiden had been completely serious about bringing the entire academy under her influence by combining those two items. She clicked her tongue in frustration. Simply by wearing the perfume around the academy, Pina could naturally increase everyone's favor toward her. Once they had been won over, she could continue feeding them as much of the potion as she wished. Remilia recalled that, to avoid problems with poison testers, the Star Maiden must have first brought all of the guards and attendants under her influence. She remembered that Emmy had even warned everyone not to eat anything Pina offered, suspecting that she might use an item. However, those fools had ignored Emmy's warnings and dismissed her concerns as nothing more than jealousy. Remilia noted that, although those items could create affection where none had existed before, they could neither brainwash people nor rob them of their sanity. Remilia reflected that this meant those people had willingly gone along with Emmy's suffering. Considering the shop's location in the capital, she concluded that this must have been where Pina had purchased those items. She decided that her first move would be simple. Fixing the premium item shop with a determined gaze, she resolved to dismantle it. The merchant remarked that the item was very affordable and even offered to include a second one for free since she was a new customer. Remilia politely declined both offers. The merchant then suggested the Love Horoscope Compendium, but Remilia explained that she had not come there to purchase anything. He responded that no one stumbled into the shop by accident and that the goods he sold could not be found anywhere else. Curious, he asked what kind of item she was searching for if his inventory did not satisfy her. Remilia replied that she was not after any merchandise. She had come for him. The shopkeeper reacted in confusion. With a flick of her hand, Remilia removed the veil concealing his head, exposing his ears. Startled, he instinctively reached up to cover them. Remilia confirmed that her suspicion had been correct. She apologized for the delayed introduction and introduced herself as Remilia Rosa Graupner. She explained that she had been driven out of the capital only days earlier and suggested that he simply think of her as the lady of a small rural village. She then addressed him as the demon shopkeeper. The shopkeeper asked whether she was the same noblewoman described by the rumors as the foolish former fiancé who had been exiled to the countryside after attempting to murder the Star Maiden. Remilia calmly observed that her reputation seemed to precede her. He then asked what such a famous noblewoman wanted with him, remarking that information determined whether a business survived or failed. Remilia clarified that she was not interested only in him but in the demon race as a whole. The shopkeeper questioned what she meant and wondered whether she believed the kingdom would welcome her back into the capital for hunting down demons. Remilia dismissed the notion, saying she would never suggest something so gruesome. Instead, she explained that she wished to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. When the shopkeeper asked what sort of arrangement she had in mind, Remilia proposed that he and the other demons secretly living within the kingdom establish a village in her newly assigned territory. The shopkeeper was visibly shocked. Remilia observed that even a demon could be rendered speechless. He asked how such an arrangement would benefit her. Remilia replied that she desired only one thing. She intended to create a prosperous land and use its success to spite everyone who had falsely accused her. The shopkeeper repeated the words false charges. Remilia explained that, to achieve that goal, she needed people willing to settle there. The shopkeeper admitted that it was difficult not to be suspicious when she was making such a proposal to demons. Remilia answered that trusting demons made far more sense than trusting her own race, which had happily betrayed her. She questioned whether it was not strange to assume humans deserved trust simply because they were human while demons deserved suspicion simply because they were demons. In her view, they should instead cooperate as kindred spirits who had both been cast aside by humanity. She added that she did not expect an immediate answer and explained that her visit that day was merely to introduce herself. Remilia then handed him a sack. The shopkeeper remarked that it contained gold. As he opened it, he froze in shock. Staring at its contents in disbelief, he wondered what he was looking at. Inside were countless mana stones. He immediately picked one up for closer inspection and found that every single stone was of premium quality, possessing flawless transparency, size, color, and cutting. Every detail was of the highest standard. Astonished, he asked where Remilia had obtained them. Remilia answered that she had produced the mana stones only an hour before arriving. She also asked him to accept the gold as a gesture of goodwill. The shopkeeper reacted with even greater surprise. Remilia explained that it represented every coin she had saved since childhood. The shopkeeper declared that she was insane. Remilia acknowledged that it certainly sounded insane for an exiled noblewoman to propose building a village of demons in a remote rural region, but she believed she had to go that far to prove her sincerity. The shopkeeper laughed. He asked whether she truly trusted him not to take the money and disappear. Remilia replied that she did. He struck her as a shrewd businessman, and she doubted he would throw away the profitable relationship she was offering. The shopkeeper asked whether she intended to continue supplying the shop with mana stones. Remilia confirmed that she did. She explained that she had heard the demon realm was a harsh place to live, causing many demons to secretly reside among humans while selling goods and resources to support their homeland. She added that the demon race numbered only around 30,000 individuals in total, making them a very small people. Remilia explained that demons were persecuted whenever their identities were discovered among humans, while opportunities for a prosperous life in the demon realm were scarce. In her village, however, she intended to offer them the chance to work in peace and live like kings. The shopkeeper remarked that she had clearly done her research. He said he would need time to discuss the proposal with his companions. Remilia replied that the money was collateral toward that goal and entrusted the rest to him. She expressed her hope that she would return to good news before long. The shopkeeper remarked that he would appreciate reaching a decision before Remilia felt compelled to approach other shopkeepers instead. He then asked whether she even knew about the existence of the other shop. After a moment, he wondered how someone as perceptive as Remilia had ended up being falsely accused and driven out of the capital. Remilia admitted that she had simply been unaware of the existence of demon-made products capable of influencing people's thoughts. She explained that, since then, she had spent considerable time thinking about how the premium items from the game would manifest in the real world. The shopkeeper acknowledged her explanation. Remilia bid the shopkeeper farewell and departed. Left alone, he quietly remarked that he had never met a noblewoman quite like her. Meanwhile, Remilia reflected on the situation. From the sound of things, she would soon have reliable pawns at her disposal. As for the demons, she did not have to worry about Pina interfering with them, since, in the game, neither the love potion nor the charm perfume had any effect on the demon race. The villainous Remilia had begun building a land where demons could live in happiness. She believed that Emmy would have done the very same if it meant creating a world where she herself could live happily. Remilia teleported back to her estate. Letting out a quiet laugh, she reflected that she had never intended to do something so reckless as seize the demons by force. On the contrary, she sought the opposite. She wondered what happier world there could be than one that revered her. Smiling to herself, she reminded herself that she could not afford to rest on her laurels. She then found herself wondering whether Emmy had enjoyed the encounter at the shop. Chapter 4 began with Remilia meeting the demon shopkeeper once again. Several days later, the shopkeeper brought good news regarding the resettlement of the demon race. He explained that, for the time being, they would only accept those who had nowhere else to live. Remilia smiled and expressed her satisfaction before offering to share some valuable information in return. The shopkeeper admitted that he was troubled because he had been forced to stop selling his best-selling products. At Remilia's recommendation, he had discontinued those particular items because they had begun attracting unwanted attention from the nobility. Pina's excessive use of them had apparently caused people to grow suspicious about their origin. Remilia reflected that she had been the one quietly directing those suspicions from the shadows. She advised him to relocate the shop to the town near her territory before any formal investigation could begin instead of remaining on the capital's main street. She also offered to invest in the relocation. After considering the proposal, the shopkeeper agreed that it was a sensible plan. As long as a local lord could vouch for his identity, he would be able to establish a shop on the town's main street. He added that many of his fellow demons had also become interested in obtaining letters of introduction. Remilia smiled to herself, realizing that she had completely severed the Star Maiden's access to premium items. She then asked whether she might request one more favor from him. Several days into their assignment to monitor the former fiancé of the second prince, the two royal intelligence agents observed their target, Remilia, visiting the nearby town for the first time. Agent A noted that Remilia had already dismissed all of her servants and assumed that she had simply come to buy supplies. Agent B replied that he did not know what she was planning, but he looked forward to exposing the wolf beneath her sheep's clothing. He added that Remilia had gotten off far too lightly with nothing more than exile. Agent A reminded him that their orders were only to record her movements and submit a report, making any further involvement unnecessary. Agent B urged him to keep moving. Moments later, both agents stopped in surprise at what they witnessed. Inside the guild hall, the receptionist handed Remilia her adventurer's card and confirmed that her registration had been completed. Remilia thanked her. Agent A remarked that he had never imagined a fallen future queen would register as an adventurer, a profession that earned money by hunting monsters in dungeons. Even without her family's support, he found it difficult to believe that a noblewoman would be reduced to such measures merely to cover her living expenses. Agent B commented that it was pitiful to see how far she had fallen but considered it appropriate punishment for bullying the Star Maiden. He insisted that there was no way Remilia would last as an adventurer and predicted that she would soon be crying to her parents because she was far too naive. Meanwhile, Remilia explained to the receptionist that she had already gathered several monster materials and hoped someone at the guild could appraise them. She presented the plumes of a cockatrice, the liver of a crimson bear, the venom gland of a void rat, the stinger of a tarantula bee, all of the honey from its hive, and the bloodstone of a Dravania toad. Agent B reacted with confusion and shock at the list of materials. Agent A remarked that it was one rare item after another. Agent B wondered what Remilia intended to do with the enormous amount of money she would receive, finding the situation suspicious. He even speculated that she might have taken the materials from her parents' estate. Inside the guild, the receptionist explained that appraising the materials would take some time and asked Remilia to wait. At that moment, someone called out to Remilia. She recognized the demon shopkeeper and greeted him, remarking that it was quite a coincidence to meet outside the capital. She asked whether he had come to shop for something in particular. Watching from a distance, Agent B wondered who the man was and guessed that he might be a merchant from the capital. The shopkeeper explained that he had actually been waiting for Remilia. She reacted in surprise. He said that, given her exceptional skill as a mage, he had expected she would register as an adventurer in the territory where she had been exiled. Remilia admitted that it was rather embarrassing to be so predictable. The shopkeeper replied that no successful merchant lacked foresight. Remilia then asked whether he had some business with her. The shopkeeper explained that he wished to know whether she would still be willing to continue doing business with him after he relocated. Remilia expressed her gratitude for his confidence but explained that she had already sold the rights to every product line she had created to the Graupner family. She added that her reputation among the nobility had become exceptionally poor and feared she would only cause him trouble. She also noted that every merchant in the capital had severed ties with her even before her exile. The shopkeeper observed that there was still another possibility. Remilia reacted with surprise. He asked whether he truly looked like the sort of spotless businessman who worried about maintaining good relations with nobles. He admitted that he cared far more about the mountains of money they could earn through new inventions and the monster materials she gathered than about clinging to the past. He proposed that she give him priority when supplying materials. Remilia replied that she could not have hoped for a better arrangement and thanked him. The two intelligence agents continued watching from nearby. As though remembering something, the shopkeeper pointed out that Remilia had already earned far more than enough to cover her living expenses and asked whether she intended to begin developing another new product. Remilia acknowledged his keen insight but explained that he was mistaken, as she was not planning to develop anything new. When he asked what she intended to do instead, Remilia replied that, as the new lord of her territory, she wished to properly care for her village. Both agents reacted in shock. Agent A wondered what village she was referring to and questioned whether she meant the nearly abandoned settlement outside her manor. Agent B responded by asking whether there was even a single villager left there. While the two agents remained bewildered, they overheard Remilia asking the shopkeeper for a favor instead of requesting a priority trading agreement. She asked whether he could introduce her to prospective settlers. Remilia explained that the village currently had nothing, but she hoped to welcome orphans and elderly people with no remaining relatives. Her goal was to build a place where young people who had fallen on hard times could live peacefully. The shopkeeper remarked that she truly was an unusual woman, but noted that merchants would be essential if she intended to establish a village. He agreed to help as long as there was good money to be made. Hearing the conversation, the two agents exchanged meaningful glances. Agent B concluded that Remilia was merely trying to earn goodwill after everything that had happened and dismissed the effort as pointless. After collecting the payment for the appraised materials, the subject under surveillance proceeded to accept her first commission as an adventurer. Remilia set out to eliminate the monsters infesting an already conquered dungeon. The two intelligence agents followed her until they saw her enter a doorway hidden within the forest. Agent A remarked that she was seriously attempting the commission alone. As he prepared to follow her inside, Agent B stopped him. He pointed out that the dungeon had only one entrance and exit, and warned that if Remilia used him as bait or a decoy, rescuing him would be difficult. The two agents decided instead to remain hidden near the entrance and wait for her to emerge. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Remilia reflected that everything was falling into place exactly as planned. With this accomplished, she believed no one would grow suspicious once people began settling in her village. She continued deeper into the dungeon, concluding that she had reached its deepest section. She recalled that, in the game, this dungeon had been known as the bonus stage. She remembered that, by ignoring the final door, proceeding to the left side of the chamber, and pouring magic into the mural of the goddess, a hidden reward would appear. Following those steps, Remilia entered a concealed chamber and obtained a ring that increased all of its wearer's abilities. She concluded that acquiring such a powerful item, despite how easily it could be obtained, proved that Pina had not progressed very far through the game's story. She reflected that the Star Maiden had become so preoccupied with surrounding herself with men that she had neglected her true role. Although those men were far more capable than they had originally been thanks to Emi's support, they were still nowhere near strong enough to defeat the Demon Lord or save the world. As she continued walking, Remilia suddenly burst into laughter. She declared that this world no longer needed saving because the villainess destined to destroy it, Remilia, no longer existed. A group of young nobles could never simply abandon their responsibilities to spend their time leveling up in dungeons unless the kingdom itself faced destruction, just as it had in the game. She remembered how, in the original story, Remilia had fallen into despair after losing Willard to the Star Maiden and had chosen to bring ruin upon the world. After researching ancient ruins, she had successfully summoned the Demon Lord and formed a pact with him. Miasma had spread across the sky while monsters devastated the land. In exchange for Willard's soul, Remilia had offered the entire world. The Star Maiden, however, possessed the power to cleanse the miasma. Together with her companions, she had conquered the gods' temples after they transformed into dungeons and ultimately saved the world. That was the story that should have unfolded. Instead, Remilia was now the one walking the path to victory. No matter what Pina attempted, she would always remain one step behind. She corrected herself, deciding that it was more accurate to say there was nothing Pina could do at all, because Remilia, the villainess, would deal with everything herself. Not long afterward, Remilia emerged from the dungeon. Agent A remarked that she had cleared it with incredible speed. Agent B suggested that she had probably fled instead. Before either of them could say anything more, a large cockatrice suddenly appeared nearby. Both agents reacted in shock and hurried to get away. Agent A questioned why a monster was roaming the forest. The cockatrice advanced toward an elderly man and a young girl who had been gathering plants, causing them to scream in terror. Realizing that local villagers were in danger, Agent A rushed forward to help them while cursing under his breath. Just as the monster was about to attack them, Remilia stepped in and swiftly cut it down with her sword. Everyone present stared at her in astonishment. Remilia silently vowed that Emi's Remilia would save the world long before the Star Maiden ever had the opportunity. She spoke to the young girl, expressing relief that she was safe. The girl could only stare back at her in shock. Within her heart, Remilia declared that she would rob Pina of the very reason for her existence. After a while, Remilia stood with the old man and the young girl. The old man offered her a sack, explaining that they could not spare much but asking her to accept it as a token of their gratitude. Remilia politely refused. She believed it would benefit her more for them to remain grateful to Remilia than to accept such a modest reward. She was also certain that Emi would not have accepted it under those circumstances either. Instead, Remilia offered the young girl some dried fruit, believing that something sweet would help her feel better. The girl called her the Lady Saint, causing Remilia to react in surprise. Later, Remilia walked through the village before stopping at a shop. Nearby, the two intelligence agents watched as goods were loaded onto a cart. Agent A approached her and offered her a ride back. The three of them returned together on the cart. Agent B warned Remilia not to misunderstand the situation, explaining that they had only been collecting their own necessities and that it would have been a pointless waste of time to spend 2 hours watching her walk back. He added that they had no interest in being friendly. Remilia replied that she understood and thanked them anyway. As the cart continued on its way, Remilia reflected that things seemed to be falling into place. She remembered the young girl calling her the Lady Saint. Smiling faintly, she dismissed it as nothing worth dwelling on. To her, Emi's Remilia was naturally gentle and pure, and it was Emi who deserved the title of saint more than anyone else. Remilia believed she had merely been in an unusually good mood and had shown a little more charity than she normally would have. Chapter 5 began in a town where rain finally started to fall. A young man reacted in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing, while others cried out that it was raining. The people below raised their arms in celebration. High above them, a great dragon descended with Remilia riding upon its back. Their city had been on the brink of total collapse because of the drought brought about by the dragon god's wrath. By quelling its anger, Remilia had saved all of their lives. The people hurried to gather as much rain as they could. Their leader expressed that they truly could not thank her enough and wondered how they could ever repay the debt they owed her. Remilia refused their gratitude, explaining that she had merely been fulfilling the duty that God had revealed to her. Later, the townsfolk spoke among themselves. They wondered whether the rumors about a former noblewoman who had received guidance from God and traveled the land saving people while refusing rewards were actually true. It explained why she seemed so refined, as none of them had ever seen anyone quite like her before. Someone questioned why she had stopped being a noble. Another repeated a rumor claiming that she had lost her fiancé, a prince, to the Star Maiden and, in her rage, had tried to hurt her, although she had not seemed like the type to do such a thing at all. One woman remarked that, in her opinion, trying to steal another woman's fiancé was far worse. Another agreed, thinking that if she had been in Remilia's position, she would have whipped the shameless woman herself. Others shared the same opinion. Remilia observed that her efforts seemed to be working, as a different perception of Emmy's Remilia was gradually spreading among the people. Looking at the key in her hand, she noted that she had finally acquired the last key needed to advance to the next stage after collecting the 5th key from the Desert Kingdom. A few months had passed since she began clearing the game. She recalled the signs of the world's destruction, the miasma that tainted everything, from the land and humans to even monsters. She remembered wiping out the monster dens infesting the border, defeating the monsters in the harbor to restore maritime trade, rescuing a young girl who had been sacrificed to the monster ruling over the mountain, and slaying the succubus of the City of Flowers. She also knew she could not allow Emmy's reputation to remain stained in any way, and considered it fortunate that she had been able to resolve the game's events before they had the chance to grow worse. Standing before a doorway, she concluded that she was finally ready to make her next move. Before doing so, however, she needed to stop by the guild near her village to establish an alibi. She recalled that it had already been 3 days since she had last seen the village. Not long afterward, the village children spotted Remilia and immediately recognized her. They ran toward her along the grassy path and welcomed her back together. Remilia greeted them in return and asked whether they had all behaved while she had been away. The children eagerly told her that new people had arrived, so they had all been helping rebuild the old houses for them. They explained that they had continued making compost just as they had been taught, and that school had been going well because there were many fun things to learn. Pleased with their answers, Remilia observed that they had all been very good before asking where the chief was. The children told her he was at home, while one quietly revealed that it was actually supposed to be a secret. Remilia was left confused. Mr. Thorne sat at his desk deep in thought when a knock came at the door. He found Remilia standing outside and greeted her in surprise. Remilia returned the greeting and remarked that he had truly grown into his role as village chief. She noted that what he had originally wanted was simply a quiet place out of sight where he could handle business until the scrutiny surrounding the charm perfume and love potion products had died down, but that he had happened to be the perfect man for the position. Thorne replied that, while it was true he had packed up shop in the capital because of the heat, he did not recall ever quitting his life as a merchant to settle down as the village chief. Remilia reacted with mild surprise before remarking that she had heard the village was coming together wonderfully and that new children were arriving all the time. She added that a little bird had informed her that, while she had been away, Thorne had covered necessary expenses out of his own pocket whenever the village's funds were insufficient. She observed that she had assumed merchants were usually much more frugal with their spending. Thorne thanked her sincerely but explained that it had merely been a business investment. He asked her not to describe it as spending from his own pocket so carelessly, as he was simply ensuring the village continued to function properly, just as she had requested. He then remarked that, if anything, they should be the ones thanking her. Being able to live together in a village like this was something none of them could have imagined not long ago. He pointed out the children from the slums, who had once had nothing to eat, nowhere to stay, and nothing to wear but rags, and directed Remilia's attention to them as they happily called out to her. He observed that they were now the picture of perfect health. Remilia replied that she, too, was only doing what she believed she should do. She thought to herself that she was simply doing what Emmy would have done if she had been there. To fulfill Emmy's wish and make her hope for the happiness of Remilia the Villainess a reality, these were nothing more than trivial matters that needed to be resolved. Thorne added that he still had many colleagues in the capital running businesses of every kind, and if she ever had products to sell or information to gather, she could leave it to them. Remilia agreed and entrusted those matters to their care. She regarded all of it as necessary for achieving her ultimate goal. Besides, she had only decided to distribute distinguishing clothing because memorizing every face to identify who belonged to which role would have been far too troublesome. Remilia watched the children playing in the open yard nearby. A group gathered around while washing clothes, looking delighted. She recalled that the village's first settlers had been children between the ages of 2 and 14 whom Thorn had brought from the capital's slums. When they had first arrived at the village, Remilia introduced herself as the lady of the village. The children had looked frightened, and Thorn had reassured them that Remilia was someone they could trust. Looking at them, Remilia could tell from their eyes how tense their bodies were and how every part of them remained on guard. Considering the lives they had endured, such a reaction was only natural. A single loaf of bread, a single thin blanket, or a life stripped of all dignity had been all they had known. Yet the reason these children, with their human-like appearances and weak magic, had crossed from the demon realm into the human realm was because even the dangers awaiting them there were preferable to facing extinction beneath the miasma, which was far denser in the demon realm. Remilia regarded it as a desperate measure by the demon king. Even in the human realm, however, the steadily increasing miasma had begun causing some people to lose themselves, while the number of monsters continued to rise. In the end, only the overwhelming power of purification could save the world. This world truly was little more than a stage prepared for the Star Maiden, while these unfortunate beings were merely props in her play. Remilia addressed the newcomers, telling them that she would not ask them to place their trust in her without reason. Instead, she wanted them to know that whenever they did something for her, she would always reward them accordingly. As thanks for coming to her village, she offered every one of them a meal. Later, she showed them a house and encouraged them to use it however they wished. The children reacted with surprise, asking if they could truly use it. Remilia explained that it was not an especially remarkable home, as she had only managed to repair an abandoned house with very little time to spare. One of the children asked what they would have to do in return. Remilia explained that she would demand nothing from them simply for living there and that she only had a single request. The children worked together to tend the fields before gathering around Remilia as she sat with them. She asked them to help cultivate the fields and wondered whether a meal for each day they assisted would be sufficient compensation. On the 15th night after their arrival at Remilia's mansion, Thorn brought supplies consisting of 3 bags of white rapa seeds, 5 bags of soya bean seeds with roots, and 5 bunches of alpine yarrow. He also confirmed the delivery of 1 wheeled handcart, 2 bundles of straw paper, and boards and nails without any specified size or quantity. Remilia thanked him, remarking that it was all thanks to him that their livelihoods in the village were progressing so smoothly. Thorn then asked how the children were doing. Remilia replied that they were still somewhat wary, but they seemed to be gradually growing accustomed to living there. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted when the children rushed into Remilia's mansion in distress. They informed her that the youngest among them had developed a fever that would not subside. Remilia examined the child and realized that healing magic had no effect. She concluded that a demon's physiology must differ from that of a human and considered that breaking down the spell to its fundamental principles might reveal a solution. She regarded the situation as ideal timing, as she had already been planning to research demon folk more thoroughly. One of the girls desperately asked Remilia to save her little brother. A boy confessed that he should have asked for help when he noticed the child's condition that morning. He blamed himself, explaining that he had been responsible for looking after the boy that day but had remained silent because he feared that asking for help over something like this would make Remilia think the child was useless. He had worried that she would consider the boy's weak body a burden or regret taking them in. Having finally found a place where they could all live together normally after escaping their previous hardships, they feared that being driven from the village would leave them with nowhere else to go. He lamented that the situation had become so severe because he had convinced himself the illness would go unnoticed, never imagining the child had been suffering so badly. Overcome with guilt, he broke down in tears, repeatedly apologizing for his wrongdoing. He begged Remilia to heal the little boy, insisting that she could throw him out if necessary. He pleaded with her not to punish the others because they had done nothing wrong. He admitted that he had been too frightened to speak up because he thought she would eventually discover the truth, and he blamed himself further for not paying closer attention, continuing to apologize over and over. Remilia stopped them all. She understood that relying on her and having to beg a human for help must have terrified them. She acknowledged the courage it had taken for them to do so and promised that she would always reward such courage. She added that caring for the health of her precious subjects was her duty and thanked them for placing their trust in her. Remilia knew they had been enduring such overwhelming anxiety that they had been on the verge of tears the entire time. Since there was a possibility that the boy was suffering from an infectious illness, she decided to keep him at her house for the time being and instructed the others to return home. Thorn then handed her a bottle of medicine. He admitted that, to be honest, he had harbored doubts himself, believing Remilia might have been just another human whose words would amount to empty promises. He explained that demons often possessed physiologies that differed greatly even among themselves, so he could not be certain how effective the medicine would be, but asked her to use it regardless. Remilia thanked him, considering him a lifesaver. Those children had once lived in orphanages, only to be ostracized, bullied, and ultimately cast out as demons because of their non-human characteristics. Thanks to that incident, Remilia was able to learn far more about the physiology of demon folk than she had expected, making it an unexpected boon. After she healed the youngest child, the children placed their complete trust in her. They also began praising her to every demon folk who arrived after them. Builders and farmers soon followed, greatly contributing to the village's development. To keep funds flowing, Remilia devised several new ideas that she had yet to put into practice. She developed special products that took advantage of the unique forms of magic possessed by demon folk, abilities that humans could not replicate. All that remained was for Thorn to use his merchant connections in the capital to sell them. Humanity as a whole remained unaware of the large population of demon folk living within an unexplored realm, and Remilia intended to exploit that lack of knowledge to transform her territory into a land more prosperous than even the royal capital. Back in the present, Remilia informed Thorn that, since he had delivered her compensation, it was time for her to leave. Thorn reacted with surprise, pointing out that she had only just returned. The children were equally surprised and asked if she was leaving already. One begged her to take some time to rest, even if only for the night, while another assured her that they could now prepare the meals she had taught them to cook, giving her a reason to stay. Remilia asked if they had been listening to everything and remarked that they truly were a troublesome group of children. After considering the matter, she acknowledged how hard they had all been working and suggested they have dinner together. She decided that she could postpone her departure until the following day. Remilia reflected that food always tasted best when it was shared with everyone. She watched as more people joined the gathering and the children happily enjoyed their meal around her. Holding a skewer of food, she found it truly delicious and quietly thought of Emmy. The following day, Remilia resumed her journey. Before long, she arrived at the great gates of the dwarven land known as Cavern City. Passing through its bustling streets lined with stone buildings and dwarf residents, she observed that it was a city populated entirely by demi-humans. She had read about it in books, but seeing it in person was an entirely different experience. It truly was a cosmopolitan city, a melting pot of many different races. A person suddenly stumbled into Remilia and fell forward, but Remilia caught her before she could hit the ground. Believing herself to be at fault, Remilia apologized repeatedly, saying she must not have been watching where she was going, and asked whether the girl was hurt. The girl insisted that she was the one who should apologize instead. Smiling, Remilia realized that she had finally found the person she had been searching for. The girl was the dwarven princess, Sarastil. Remilia introduced herself and explained that she had only arrived in the country that day. The girl introduced herself as Sarastil, or Sarah, and thanked Remilia for catching her. Chapter 6 continued in the land of the Smiths, the kingdom of the dwarves, where the god of fire resided. Sarah led Remilia through the city, calling for her to follow. Remilia laughed softly and urged Sarah to wait for her as she followed behind. Together, they wandered through the vast city of stone, exploring its streets and enjoying each other's company. After some time, they sat together on a bench and continued their conversation. Remilia admitted that she had been surprised to learn Sarah was actually the second princess, freely spending time in the town. She shared that, in her own country, there were very few women who knew how to wield a sword or fight, so she had never before had a friend with whom she could speak so openly. Sarah remarked that the same was true in her own country. Remilia reacted with confusion and questioned whether it was truly acceptable for the younger sister of the holy princess to spend time with her like this, having heard that even nobles often had to wait a long time just to be granted an audience with the holy princess. Sarah assured her there was no problem, explaining that this was precisely why Remilia had come to their country in the first place. She added that, when it came to people who genuinely needed to see the holy princess, as Remilia did, she could be surprisingly generous. As Sarah departed, she asked Remilia to return someday and tell her more stories about dungeons. Remilia readily agreed that she would love to. Left alone, Remilia observed that dwarven architecture was every bit as majestic as she had expected. Sensing someone approaching from behind, she turned to find attendants greeting her and informing her that the holy princess was awaiting her arrival. As she followed them, Remilia reflected that her strategy of befriending the second princess, Sarah, before attempting to secure an audience with the holy princess had succeeded. She considered that such an approach would surely have been impossible during a first meeting for the woman who did not seem to get along well with members of the same sex, especially after losing access to perfume. Of course, she thought, that was only natural because she was acting as Emmy's Remilia, someone who was impossible not to love. Upon reaching the great doors, Remilia opened them herself. She steeled her resolve, knowing that, for the sake of overcoming the final stage of the game, she first needed to bring the god of fire to heel. She knelt before the throne, where the holy princess sat surrounded by flames. The holy princess remarked that she had heard much about Remilia from her younger sister. She had also heard that Remilia was an oracle who traveled the land helping those in need, and that rumors of her deeds had even reached the dwarven kingdom. She then asked what had brought Remilia before her. Remilia felt the immense pressure and overwhelming magical power radiating from the holy princess and concluded that it would help the conversation proceed smoothly. She was relieved that she could avoid awkward questions by relying on her reputation as an oracle who received divine revelations. Confirming the holy princess's understanding, she explained that she had been shown visions she could only interpret as divine revelations. Those visions spoke of strange beings not of this world, of an approaching crisis that threatened to bring about an apocalypse, and of the actions necessary to prevent it. She declared that there was only one reason she had come: to obtain the sacred armor of the god of fire. The holy princess reacted with surprise. She observed that not since the Age of Heroes had anyone made such a bold request within those chambers and questioned whether Remilia fully understood the power possessed by the sacred armor. Remilia affirmed that she did. The holy princess let out a thoughtful hum, finding the matter intriguing, and asked Remilia exactly whom she intended to strike down with such power. Remilia answered that her target was the Lord of the Heavens and the Creator of the world. The sacred armor was said to defy the divine judgment of the gods. In other words, it granted mankind the power to slay gods. The holy princess laughed, remarking that yet another person with lofty ambitions had appeared before her. She questioned why it was that those who came always sought to challenge the mightiest of the gods. Remilia stated that the miasma threatened to destroy the world and that those two gods were the root cause of it all. The holy princess asked whether Remilia truly believed that the gods who governed the world were responsible for the miasma and questioned the basis for such a belief. Remilia explained that the knowledge she was about to reveal had come through divine revelation and concerned a history that predated all recorded history, along with a prophecy foretelling the catastrophic destruction awaiting the world. Remilia began with the beginning of the world. In the beginning there were the heavens and the earth. In those distant ages, the gods dwelled in the heavens, while humans, dwarves, and elves lived upon the earth. Their realm was separated from the demon realm by a vast ocean. During the primordial age, only a single god existed, and he discovered humanity living in a dark corner of the earth. He frequently descended from the heavens to reveal himself to mankind, and at times he guided the course of their development. He watched civilizations take shape, and in time, humanity came to worship him as the creator of the world. The other gods observed these events with great interest, and gradually they too began intervening in the affairs of the earth. Some caused the land to bear fruit, while others brought floods and calamities. There were also gods who bestowed wisdom and talents upon humanity to advance civilization. As a result, Remilia explained, people built shrines and temples in honor of each god according to the powers they displayed upon the earth and came to worship them through faith. The holy princess quietly reflected that Remilia truly possessed knowledge of the world's ancient history. Remilia expressed relief that the history revealed to her had not been mistaken. The holy princess then questioned how any of this related to the miasma attributed to the Creator and the Lord of the Heavens, believing that Remilia's account could not possibly end there. Remilia explained that the gods possessed infinite power to perform miracles upon the earth, but there had always been one small problem. When the holy princess questioned what that problem was, Remilia continued. As long as the gods exercised their power in the heavens, nothing happened. However, once they descended to the earth, the situation changed. Using their divine power upon the earth caused them to experience something akin to human fatigue, and as a result they produced a certain sediment. That sediment was the true nature of what the world knew as miasma, and the same remained true even in the present day. The holy princess realized that the miasma was essentially the god's excretion, and Remilia confirmed that this understanding was correct. Consequently, most gods eventually ceased descending directly to the earth, choosing instead to exercise their divine authority through priests and priestesses. Remilia further explained that, if the gods remained on the earth for too long, the sediment would accumulate until it became so heavy that they could no longer ascend back to the heavens. The Creator still remained stranded within the demon realm, and for that reason the demon realm was so densely covered in miasma. The danger of using his powers upon the earth had never been unknown to the Creator. Remilia then questioned whether the holy princess knew why the Creator had continued exerting his power until he had become incapable of returning to the heavens. She revealed that the cause had been the god known as the Lord of the Heavens. The Creator had been fully aware of the sediment steadily accumulating upon him. To deal with it, he had entrusted his daughter, the goddess of purification, with the task of cleansing the sediment. However, an incident had occurred that would ultimately lead the world toward destruction. The goddess of purification rejected the Lord of the Heavens' proposal of marriage and, out of spite, he imprisoned her. The holy princess reacted with shock, astonished by how much had been revealed to Remilia. Remilia continued by explaining that several gods had supposedly opposed the Lord of the Heavens' actions, only to be struck down by him after grief had transformed him into a tyrant. The holy princess acknowledged that the number of gods continued to diminish even in the present era. Remilia observed that even mortals could plainly see that the influence of the gods upon the earth had weakened as well. Bereft of his daughter's power of purification, the Creator had, ironically, become the very herald of mankind's destruction. The miasma overflowing from the creator's body seeped into the earth, giving rise to monsters that were then released into the world. The places known as dungeons, where monsters dwelled, had originally been created only to isolate regions heavily contaminated by miasma in an effort to prevent it from spreading to nearby civilizations. However, this measure had been only a temporary solution. Although it slowed the spread of the miasma, it could not eliminate it. In the end, the creator had effectively become an evil god who had to be destroyed before he brought the world to ruin. As the miasma spread across more of the world, the number of monsters would continue to increase. Eventually, humans would begin transforming into monsters, the earth would split apart, and mountains would erupt. In time, nothing would remain but glaciers buried beneath layers of ash, with all living things long since extinct. To prevent that future, Remilia had gathered the keys needed to unlock the gateway to the heavens. She requested that the Holy Princess grant her the sacred armor of the Goddess of Fire so that, as a mortal, she could challenge the gods. The Holy Princess questioned whether Remilia did not tremble at the thought of defying the gods. Remilia answered that there was nothing more terrifying than watching a dreadful fate loom over the person she loved while being powerless to do anything except hope for a miracle. Compared to that unbearable nightmare, killing a god was nothing. The Holy Princess admitted that she had taken quite a liking to Remilia and praised her for coming so far. She remarked that Remilia was clearly not the pitiful young woman pretending to be a martyr and blindly following supposed divine revelations as she had initially assumed. She reflected on the last time she had entrusted the sacred armor to a mortal and recalled another young woman who had come seeking the power to defeat a goddess who had stolen her lover. That girl, she revealed, had been the legendary hero of ages past, a member of the royal family and the goddess of fire herself. The Holy Princess observed that Remilia had referred to her in a rather unusual way. Remilia laughed and confessed that, ever since she had been a little girl, she had dreamed of meeting the holy goddess from the fairy tales she loved, and that she had genuinely looked forward to this meeting. The Holy Princess found the remark charming and promised to devote both body and soul to forging the greatest suit of armor ever created for Remilia. Remilia responded that she was humbled beyond words. The Holy Princess then turned her attention to the materials required for the task. Remilia revealed that she had already prepared everything in advance. The Holy Princess reacted with surprise, acknowledging that Remilia's divine revelations were evidently no fabrication. Remilia vowed that, once the gods had been slain, she would return the sacred armor without fail. As those present remarked that the materials before them were all legendary treasures and hurried to appraise them, the Holy Princess questioned why Remilia intended to relinquish something whose value could never again be matched. Remilia explained that such a treasure was too great for mortals to possess. During her lifetime and for countless generations afterward, its existence would only become a source of conflict among humanity and between humanity and the remaining gods. Furthermore, she believed it only proper that the sacred armor should be returned to the goddess who had forged it. If the day ever came when someone else truly needed it, then the goddess of fire herself should be the one to judge that person's worthiness, just as she had judged Remilia's. Quietly, Remilia reflected that this was exactly what Emmy would have said. The Holy Princess praised her answer and declared that, in that case, she would also grant Remilia the divine protection of fire. Remilia was surprised by this unexpected blessing, knowing that the sacred flames also possessed the power of purification. Inwardly, she offered her gratitude to Emmy. Light and sacred fire gathered around the Holy Princess as the sacred armor took form, encasing Remilia in gleaming plates adorned with intricate floral patterns. Clad completely in the divine armor and holding a slender sword in one hand, she stood before the attendants, who watched her with awe and reverence. The Holy Princess bestowed her blessing upon Remilia, wishing her fortune in the battles to come. Standing before the grand temple nestled against the mountains, Remilia turned toward the path ahead. She looked up at the floating keys gathered before her and fixed her gaze upon her first of two divine targets. For the sake of the world, she resolved to make him disappear. Chapter 7 began with Remilia using the gathered keys to open the gateway before stepping into the swirling expanse beyond. A barrier rose to block her path, and she recognized it as an attempt to impede intruders by the foolish god who tyrannized over his brethren through brute force while arrogantly calling himself the Lord of the Heavens. She regarded the barrier with disdain, knowing that without the purifying power of the sacred armor, she would never have been able to proceed. In the game, it would have taken considerable time to gather enough materials to armor the entire group, but preparing enough for only herself had taken very little time. The battle had originally been intended for a full party assembled after recruiting every possible ally, yet Remilia believed that her own strength was all she needed to rely upon. Since she needed no friends, she could complete everything more quickly than in the game because she did not waste time gathering them. She silently thanked Emmy for raising her to be so strong. Advancing through the realm, she stood firm even against a god because of Emmy. The great black-winged beast let out a low sound of surprise as Remilia stood before it. She regarded it as an evil god and struck without hesitation, shattering the ground around them as she confronted the being. The monster revealed that it had simply liked her for everything she was. It had admired the graceful way she soared through the skies and had always watched her. It followed her, collecting the flowers she left behind day after day, across countless centuries and thousands of leagues. Eventually, it came to believe that the two of them had to become one. When she rejected it, it transformed her into a lotus so they could remain together forever. The god explained that the goddess of purification had rejected its feelings because she was distressed by how filthy the world had become. It declared that it would wash away the filth and reset the world to its former state, preserving only what was pure so that everything would become beautiful and clean again. Then, it believed she would praise and love it for everything it had done. It demanded that Remilia not stand in its way and repeatedly insisted that she return its heart. Confused by its words, Remilia readied her blade as the dark sphere split apart. She regarded the creature as disgusting vermin unworthy of acceptance and remarked that, by eliminating it, she had made the world just a little more beautiful, leaving it with every reason to be grateful. Light and lotus blossoms spread throughout the realm as the goddess of purification appeared before her. After restoring the goddess of purification to her true form, Remilia explained the situation concerning her father, the creator of the world. The goddess, whose true name was Renge, agreed to help and entrusted Remilia with a catalyst to summon her whenever the need arose. With that, only the creator remained. Remilia then prepared to head back, but paused in surprise as her gaze fell upon the cave before her. She recalled that it contained rare and powerful materials intended exclusively for the Star Maiden, making them unsuitable for her. Besides, she had no use for such things anyway. She let out a soft laugh, reflecting that she had no reason to want something so tight across the chest. Elsewhere, Pina vented her frustration by smashing nearby objects while insisting that she had been doing everything exactly as it had been done in the game. She could not understand why their favorability rating was not increasing at all. She wondered if it was because they were gacha-only characters, especially since she was already running out of premium items to use on them. To make matters worse, the premium item shop had disappeared. Since the miasma had not yet become a serious enough problem, they could not even begin adventuring, which meant she could not take the characters into town. At this rate, she would never be able to make Angel hers. Having reached that conclusion, she decided she had no other choice. When David noticed her, he asked what was wrong. Pina explained that he was the only person she could turn to because of his connection with the Order of Knights. She told him that her friend had unknowingly purchased a product containing illegal drugs and was now suffering terribly because of it. The seller had claimed it was simply medicine that promoted weight loss, and she believed her friend had not deserved such an outcome. David reacted with anger upon hearing that illegal drugs had been available for someone like that to purchase. Pina explained that the shop was located in a back alley off 10th Boulevard in the capital and that a nobleman had introduced her to it, but when she tried to contact the shop owner afterward, the man had completely disappeared. After confirming the location, David stated that he would report the matter to the order immediately so they could investigate. Pina thanked him, explaining that she simply could not let the matter go. David regarded her as a kind person. Meanwhile, a woman observed the two of them from a distance. Elsewhere, that same woman approached Her Majesty and stated that she had something to report. When prompted, she revealed that it concerned the Star Maiden, Pina Blanche. Chapter 8 began in the village owned by Remilia. Workers tended barrels in the vineyard cellar, while others processed materials and oversaw construction throughout the estate grounds. The people were surprised and delighted when they spotted Remilia returning and warmly welcomed her home. Remilia acknowledged their greetings before noticing the bridge she had ordered to be built, remarking that it was coming along nicely. The villagers assured her to leave it to them, explaining that they had already begun putting the finishing touches on it. A voice suddenly called out to her. Turning toward it, Remilia saw Sophia. Sophia was a talented woman who had been handpicked to become the queen's personal bodyguard while she was still a senior on the student council. Based on the information Remilia had gathered through her spiders, the likelihood that Sophia had come as a spy was low, though she could not completely dismiss the possibility. Remilia remarked that it had certainly been some time since they had last met. Sophia expressed her relief that Remilia was doing well and observed that the village looked wonderful. Remilia explained that she held no grudge against Sophia, understanding that her appointment had required her to leave the capital not long after Sophia had enrolled. Even so, Remilia could not allow her to wander freely around the village in her absence. After thanking Sophia for coming, she asked the purpose of her visit. Addressing her as Lady Remilia, Sophia explained that she had come because there was something extremely important she wished to ask. She knelt before Remilia and requested permission to become Remilia's knight. Both Remilia and the gathered onlookers reacted with surprise and confusion. When Sophia had first learned that Remilia had left, she had broken down in disbelief. She immediately questioned David about what had happened during her absence. After learning that Remilia's engagement had been broken off and that she had even been expelled, David explained that Remilia had become jealous of Pina and attempted to murder her. He added that, after evidence of Remilia's other questionable actions had been uncovered, Willard had decided to end the engagement. Sophia was stunned by the explanation, finding it impossible to believe. She could not understand why Remilia would ever be jealous of Pina. David defended Pina, insisting that she was the most charming and friendly person in the world. Sophia fell silent, unable to make sense of what he was saying. Everything about his words felt eerie and unnatural, prompting her to investigate the matter herself. She examined the evidence and testimonies presented against Remilia. She also investigated Pina and the people surrounding her in an effort to uncover her true nature. Eventually, Sophia came to the village to discover the truth by meeting the supposed culprit herself. Looking across the land, she reflected that although she had heard the area had once been nothing more than a barren wasteland, it had developed remarkably within only a few months. She watched the villagers laughing and playing together while others gathered fruit and shared food. Sophia recalled the first time she had met Remilia. Remilia had expressed her happiness at finally having the opportunity to speak with Sophia, while Sophia had regarded it as an honor to make Remilia's acquaintance. From that first meeting, Sophia's impression of Remilia had been that of a beautiful and gentle noble lady, and she had welcomed her into the student council. The two later sparred with swords, and Remilia attacked with sharp, remarkable speed. Sophia avoided the strike by lowering herself to the ground, leaving Remilia momentarily stunned. She then tripped Remilia and caught her before she could fall. Sophia pointed out that overcommitting to an attack was one of Remilia's bad habits, explaining that lunging too far forward made it easy to lose one's balance. Remilia admitted, somewhat embarrassed, that it was simply part of her nature. After their training, they rested together on a hill. Remilia expressed how grateful she was to be able to practice with Sophia, explaining that training with the boys and using their techniques as references had not been very helpful. When Sophia wondered why Remilia worked so hard to master swordsmanship despite already being an exceptional magician, Remilia explained that the person she admired had always excelled at everything, whether in magic, swordsmanship, or academics, and she simply wished to keep up with that person. She also believed that the stronger she became, the more people she would be able to save. For that reason, she had to become stronger than anyone else. Sophia remembered that the gentle young lady she had met back then possessed a beautiful soul that set her apart from everyone else, and the village Remilia had built was proof that she still remained true to those ideals. Because of that, Sophia believed in Remilia. Returning to the present, Sophia explained that, according to reports from the royal family's intelligence agents, everyone had simply questioned the villagers living within Remilia's fief. Despite everything that had been done to her, Remilia had never sought revenge. Instead, she had devoted herself to creating a place where those abandoned by society could live with dignity and peace. Learning that had made Sophia realize that what she wanted most in the world was to help Remilia. Remilia confessed that knowing Sophia believed in her made her genuinely happy. Even so, she pointed out that Sophia was the daughter of a count, a serving knight, and David's fiancée, making such a request impossible. Sophia dismissed those concerns, revealing that she had already ended the engagement, left her family, and even been discharged as a knight. Remilia was left deeply shocked that Sophia had abandoned everything for her sake, even risking her family's name. Internally, she admitted that she had never expected Sophia to throw everything away to come here and realized that she must have miscalculated. Sophia insisted there was nothing to worry about, explaining that she had no attachment to a family willing to marry off their daughter to a piece of scum merely to strengthen its ties with the kingdom's knights. She added that she had become completely disillusioned with both David and the kingdom. She went on to explain that the village had deeply moved her. Having traveled to many places throughout the world alongside the queen, she had never seen a village as joyful as this one. On her honor as a knight, she wished to devote her loyalty to Remilia, someone who genuinely cared for her people, rather than to a foolish nation that had cast Remilia aside. Grateful for those words, Remilia accepted Sophia as her knight and entrusted herself to her care from that day forward. Sophia reacted in surprise before smiling. Remilia believed that Sophia's willingness to devote her loyalty to Emmy's Remilia made her trustworthy. She also appreciated that Sophia had chosen to investigate the truth herself instead of allowing others to influence her judgment. Having Sophia's support would also prove valuable, as many young noble girls in the throes of puberty harbored a confused sort of crush on her. It was about time she gained a pawn who knew the truth behind Emmy's condemnation, so everything had worked out well. Suddenly, several children emerged from the bushes, revealing that they had been listening the entire time. They excitedly expressed their happiness that Sophia would be serving as Remilia's knight, while Remilia gently reminded them that they should not have been eavesdropping. The children then exposed the two adults who had been listening alongside them, leaving the pair visibly embarrassed. Remilia informed Sophia that there should be a spare room available in her mansion if she wished to stay there. Sophia readily agreed and decided to move her belongings in immediately. Remilia also reminded her that the village chief operated a small shop if she needed anything. Quietly to herself, Remilia reflected that she had always been wary of having humans nearby, but now that Pina no longer had easy access to those items, she no longer needed to remain quite so guarded around them. After a while, the children began showing Sophia around the village, while others eagerly asked who she was. Meanwhile, Remilia returned to her residence, where Thorn welcomed her back while holding a drink. After thanking him, she requested the report covering everything that had happened during her absence. Thorn handed her a stack of papers, explaining that the first page summarized information regarding the newly arrived human orphans, while the second detailed the progress of newly developed products. He admitted that he had initially been uncertain about the plan to bring human children into the village, but after the demon children had taken the initiative to welcome and care for them, the newcomers had adjusted well. Remilia acknowledged the report, remarking that the children were wonderfully kind. Thorn suggested that she praise them later, as it would undoubtedly make them overjoyed, and Remilia agreed. Thorn continued by reporting that construction of the reservoir and bridge was proceeding without issue. Just as Remilia had instructed, the official application stated that both the bridge and the new style of reservoir were intended only for small-scale agriculture. Remilia thanked him, emphasizing that it was essential for the government not to realize the true scale of the development taking place in the village. Changing the subject, Thorn mentioned that the location in the capital where Remilia's store had once stood had been raided during an investigation into illegal drugs. He was relieved that, thanks to Remilia's advice, he had escaped before it happened. Remilia explained that she had already investigated the matter herself and discovered that the Star Maiden had intended to use the investigation as a pretext to imprison Thorn for her own personal use. Thorn reacted in confusion, dropping the tray he was holding. Remilia continued, explaining that Pina must have grown impatient after running low on Thorn's favorability-increasing items. Once Thorn had been arrested, Pina intended to conspire with the guards she had already seduced and accuse him of attempting to escape from custody as a pretext to keep him imprisoned. After confining him where she wanted, Pina planned to force him to secretly manufacture those items for her. Hearing this, Thorn felt goosebumps. Cursing under his breath, he admitted that he had always assumed Pina was merely an ordinary customer and had never imagined she would go so far as to enslave someone. The thought left him deeply disturbed. Remilia smiled quietly. By now, unrest had already begun to spread through the capital as the noble customers who relied on Thorn's products for hair growth or weight loss searched everywhere for an explanation as to why his shop had vanished. Once the rumors Remilia had been spreading reached them, that the Star Maiden had instigated the illegal drug investigation, they would surely come to resent Pina. At that very moment, Pina was undoubtedly furious that no one had managed to capture Thorn. Piece by piece, Remilia was arranging the entire board toward her victory. Unlike the game, the real world had no predetermined conversation events or dialogue choices. Once Pina exhausted her remaining items, it would become nearly impossible for her to draw people close through her own charm alone. Furthermore, as long as Remilia continued preserving peace throughout the world, Pina would never obtain the pretext necessary to begin adventuring. Without that, she could not even meet the people who had originally been destined to become her companions during the game's story. In other words, that wretched tramp would never win over another new ally again. Remilia remarked that she was simply relieved Thorn was safe. Thorn replied that he had to repay her somehow. Remilia insisted that it was unnecessary because she had acted of her own accord, but Thorn refused, explaining that settling his debts was a matter of credibility for him as a merchant. Remilia acknowledged that, despite serving as the village chief, he remained a merchant above all else. She then asked whether she might trouble him with a single request. Thorn readily agreed, promising that if it was within his power, he would grant it. Remilia revealed that there was someone she wished him to arrange a meeting with. Although Thorn could think of no important acquaintance other than Remilia herself, she clarified that she wished to meet his ruler, the Demon King. Thorn froze in shock, struggling to respond. When Remilia wondered if the request was asking too much, she instead brought up the affliction that had plagued demonkind for centuries, the frenzy. She asked him to consider what he would think if she claimed to possess a possible cure. Thorn's expression darkened in astonishment as he asked her to explain further. A few days later, Remilia was informed that an audience with the Demon King had been arranged. She resolved to make Emmy's Remilia into the saint who saved the world. To her, Emmy had always been someone who helped others without expecting anything in return, and Remilia believed that this was the path Emmy herself would have chosen. She teleported to the storehouse near the castle in the demon realm where Thorn replenished his stock. A demon approached, recognizing her as Lady Remilia. The demon remarked that it had never expected a human to use such an expensive transfer device to travel between realms before informing her that any weapons she carried would be held temporarily. It then personally escorted her to the castle. Not long afterward, they arrived. Remilia asked the demon to wait for her outside before entering. She knelt with her head lowered as she awaited the Demon King's arrival. Even the audience chamber had fallen into disrepair, making it obvious how desperate the country's circumstances had become when even basic maintenance had become difficult. A voice instructed her to raise her head, addressing her as the daughter of man. The Demon King stated that he had heard she possessed knowledge of a cure for the frenzy. He remarked that little could surprise him anymore after seeing his own face so often, yet he still wished to know whether what he had heard was true. He was a tall and striking man with short dark hair, 2 curved black horns rising from his head, sharp, deep eyes, and finely sculpted features that made him remarkably handsome. Even Remilia found herself momentarily stunned by his beauty. Realizing that the man before her was the Demon King, Angel, she respectfully requested permission to speak. Chapter 9 opened with Remilia and Angel speaking. Remilia explained that although she did not possess a cure, she did know of a solution to the frenzy. Meanwhile, Thorn remained in the village, watching the rain fall outside his window as he anxiously hoped Remilia's meeting with the Demon King would go well. His thoughts drifted back to the day he had collapsed in exhaustion, and he realized with shock that 20 years had already passed since then. At that time, Thorn had been kneeling in a great hall, struggling to breathe. Amid the sound of chewing, he looked up to see a demon consuming flesh. A large, powerfully built demon with long, wild hair and curved horns crouched over another figure lying on the floor, driving a blade into the victim's leg as dark blood spread across the stone. Gaunt and emaciated, Thorn swallowed hard as he sank deeper into his suffering. Then another figure stepped forward and struck, severing the demon's head. Dark vital fluid burst across the floor as the head fell away and the demon's body collapsed. Thorn watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. Moments later, Angel's sister carried Thorn and confirmed that he was the last child from the orphanage. She resolved to teleport the children to the human realm because it was the only option while so many frenzied demons still roamed outside. Entrusting everything else to Angel, the siblings parted ways. The arrival of the frenzy had marked the hour of doom for all demonkind. After arriving in the human realm, the first thing Thorn remembered noticing was how much easier it was to breathe. The children were told that they had reached the human realm, where the miasma was thin, nature remained abundant, and food was plentiful. They were dressed in clothing native to a particular region of the human realm, allowing the characteristic features of demonkind to remain hidden. To avoid persecution, they had to conceal their true identities and live quietly among humans. Even so, such a life was far preferable to living in constant fear of the frenzy in the demon realm. Later, the children were instructed to gather as many plants as possible before nightfall. The settlement consisted of stone buildings connected by narrow paths. Those who had arrived before them had often found work as adventurers before returning to the slums to provide jobs for the others. Thorn entered a room to check on Mizari. She apologized for causing everyone so much trouble, explaining that she only needed to recover enough magical energy before she could return that evening. Thorn reflected that using ancient teleportation magic to transport so many people was absurd and considered it a miracle that Mizari was even capable of moving afterward. Even so, the only people she could transport were those whose magical power was significantly weaker than her own. Mizari found that limitation frustrating, but only those with low magical power resembled humans closely enough to remain safe in the human realm. Thorn understood the reasoning, knowing that the frenzy claimed those with the weakest magical power first. Those individuals were so weak that they could barely breathe in the demon realm, making them effectively useless there. However, because they looked similar to humans, they could conduct business with them in the human realm. Thorn explained that the frenzy took much longer to affect those with strong magical power, leaving time to search for a solution. Meanwhile, those who had escaped to the human realm could trade potions and other items that only demon folk could produce in exchange for supplies to send back home. He believed this was the best way to save as many lives as possible. Mizari listened in thoughtful silence. Thorn hoped that one day the kind man, who had always taken pride in his strength and devoted himself to developing crops resistant to miasma, would not fall to the frenzy. He also hoped that his gentle friend, who had given her life to protect the children from the man she loved so that he would not devour them, would no longer have to suffer such a fate. More than anything, he wished for the day they could save everyone from the living hell their homeland had become, where they were forced to kill friends and family who succumbed to the frenzy. Mizari lowered her gaze in sorrow, reflecting that both of them had been remarkable people. Thorn agreed. Mizari apologized that they had been unable to save them, lamenting that despite calling themselves royalty, they could not even protect their own people. Thorn spoke of the man, explaining that once a demon was consumed by the frenzy, the only thing left was to devour those with magical power until death claimed them. Yet, just before the end, the man had regained his sanity long enough to thank the Demon King for stopping him. Thorn asked Mizari to convey his gratitude to the Demon King for saving all of their lives. Mizari quietly agreed. Only a handful possessed the strength necessary to defeat a demon completely consumed by the frenzy. Thorn wondered how many times the Demon King had been forced to shed tears while cutting down his own people. Before witnessing it himself, Thorn had never realized that the Demon King ruled over such unbearable suffering without staining his hands in blood. A demon overcome by the frenzy had to be killed immediately, or even more lives would be lost. Even among those capable of doing so, very few possessed the resolve to strike down their own friends and family. Some instead chose to offer themselves to the loved ones who had fallen to the frenzy. Others claimed that the Demon King, who could mercilessly turn his blade against his own brethren, must have been born without a heart. In truth, however, no one had confronted reality as he had. Thorn wondered how much easier it would have been if the Demon King had simply convinced himself that everything had been done for the country's sake. Yet he never did, because he refused to lessen the weight of those lives in any way. His tears were not shed for frenzied monsters that needed to be put down, but for fellow citizens laid to rest. Everyone else sought excuses to justify their own weakness and shift the burden onto the shoulders of the strong, all while pretending they alone possessed pure hearts and souls. Witnessing that had shaken Thorn to his core while also confronting him with his own helplessness. In the present, Thorn silently pleaded with the Demon King to place his faith in Lady Remilia. He believed with certainty that she was the one capable of easing the Demon King's suffering as well. Despite Mizari's earlier warning, Thorn concluded that it had truly been for the best that he had begun selling those questionable potions. Mizari remarked that Thorn would undoubtedly become an excellent merchant. He could read, write, perform calculations, and possessed a keen eye for detail. She had encouraged him to smile, explaining that no merchant could succeed without one. If he wanted others to believe in him, he first had to learn how to smile. Thorn then recalled Remilia's observation that it was indeed absurd for an exiled noble girl to build a village for demons in such a remote countryside, and that he would have to do at least that much to appear credible. Yet Remilia's smile alone had been powerful enough to make him believe in her without hearing a single opposing argument. He doubted he would ever forget the shock of that moment. As a merchant who had carried a blade for many years, he likened her presence to beholding someone wielding a gleaming legendary sword. People were instinctively drawn to her, as though they understood they were safest by her side. Her strength differed from the Demon King's. Whereas the Demon King's kindness and overwhelming sense of responsibility compelled him to shoulder countless burdens alone, Remilia's strength came from her absolute faith in something powerful enough to protect and support her, allowing her to keep that radiant smile. Thorn wondered what continued to support her now that she had been exiled to such a distant place. He became convinced that this unwavering faith was the true source of Remilia's strength, the power that would one day deliver them all from hell. He believed that if anyone could save not only the Demon King, who had protected them all with tears in his eyes, but every demon as well, it was Lady Remilia, smiling all the while. The scene returned to Remilia and the Demon King, Angel. Remilia explained that when a demon lost control due to an outburst of the frenzy, it could sometimes awaken special magical abilities. In the past, some had gained the power to teleport at will, and their newfound instincts had guided them to the human realm, where the miasma was less dense. If a demon afflicted by the frenzy preyed upon others, it could eventually regain its sanity, and those who came into contact with traces of its magical power became the origin of many mythical monsters found in human legends. The few fortunate enough to survive and recover would disguise themselves as humans and live among them. It was a little-known fact that the first prince of Angel's homeland was himself descended from a demon through his mother, a concubine. Because Pina knew this, she had never attempted to approach the first prince, as premium items had no effect on demons. Angel admitted that he could not understand how Remilia had come to know all of this. He questioned whether she was proposing that he simply abandon their homeland. Although their numbers had dwindled, 30,000 demons still remained. Not all of them possessed the means to cross the Great Sea, and he could not abandon his people. Remilia explained that she had not come to offer a solution that amounted to little more than postponing the inevitable. Even if every demon migrated to the human realm, the miasma would eventually spread there as well. The frenzy was not something that could simply be escaped. Angel pointed out that demons could regain their sanity by consuming enough humans, and fortunately there were more than enough humans to sustain all of his people. In the game, this had been the turning point that led the Demon King to join forces with Remilia in a campaign to destroy humanity and claim their land. Remilia argued that even if demons could recover by consuming humans, she questioned whether such kind-hearted people could truly continue living while trapped in an endless cycle of guilt over murder and fear of the frenzy's return. Expecting an entire race to endure perpetual madness and slaughter simply because the victims were humans instead of demons was unreasonable. Frustrated, Angel demanded to know what she expected him to do. Remilia understood that the Demon King had ultimately chosen the ruthless path of destroying humanity for the sake of saving his own people, whom it was his duty to protect. Above all, he wished to save his little brother, the first person who had vowed to sacrifice himself should the Demon King ever lose his sanity. When the Demon King Angel reached his 140th birthday, the final time limit passed. He cradled his younger brother's bloodied face in his hands, his own features stained with dark blood. Looking down in unbearable grief, he collapsed to his knees beneath the pouring rain while holding his brother close. As the demon king wailed in sorrow over the brother he had killed with his own hands, Emmy also began to cry. Between Angel and the Villainess, Emmy truly had far too much of a soft spot for the story's villains. Curled up, she lamented how heartless the creators had been, wondering why everything had to end so tragically. She believed that Angel, Klimt, and all the other demons deserved happiness as well. Closing her eyes, Remilia silently assured Emmy that she would leave everything to her. Angel explained that despite centuries of research and effort, no one had discovered a way to deal with the miasma that caused the frenzy. He also mentioned the teleportation magic Mizari had developed to transport children with weak magical power to the human realm. Each passing year brought more crop failures, and his people barely managed to survive on what little they earned by selling magical goods in the human realm. He demanded to know how an ordinary human girl could possibly claim to possess a way to save the demon realm. Remilia replied that she wished to make one small correction. It was not only the demon realm she intended to save. Angel then asked what sacrifice she was willing to offer in exchange. Remilia stood tall and declared that it was the world she had come to save, and the world she was prepared to offer up to destruction. Angel stared at her in stunned silence, his eyes widening in disbelief. He asked how she intended to accomplish such a feat. His natural magic should have allowed him to perceive any lie, yet he could find not a trace of falsehood in her words. The sincerity behind her declaration of salvation left him genuinely shaken. Angel then questioned whether she truly understood the source of the miasma and the cause of the frenzy. Remilia explained that the miasma was anything but a natural phenomenon. It seeped from the creator, who languished at the heart of the demon realm. If left unchecked, it would not only destroy demonkind but eventually suffocate the entire world, bringing all life to an end. Angel demanded to know how a human could possess knowledge of the shrine where the creator rested. Remilia answered that there was only one way to prevent the catastrophe. Each time the creator used his divine power, more miasma was released. Therefore, the goddess of purification, Renge, whose power could cleanse the miasma, had to be brought there so she could restore the world to its natural order. Angel again questioned how she could possibly know such things. Remilia revealed that she possessed the memories of the girl destined to save the world. When Angel sought clarification, she explained that they were memories of events that had not yet come to pass, or perhaps should have come to pass. Using those memories, she had trained herself, journeyed alone across the world through ruins and dungeons, gathered the keys that opened the path to the realm of the gods, and defeated the Lord of the Heavens. Everything she knew, how to grow stronger, where to find the goddess of purification, and why the ancient keys were capable of suppressing the miasma that had vanished centuries ago, had come from those memories. Emmy was the world's only salvation, and those memories belonged to her, making every word Remilia spoke true. She continued by explaining that someone whose heart was filled with malice had unexpectedly interfered, causing events to diverge drastically from the memories she possessed. It was true that Pina had become a troublesome nuisance, and because Remilia had never fulfilled the role of the Villainess, events had genuinely strayed from their original course. She had not spoken a single lie. By presenting the facts in this manner, she could tell the truth without revealing everything. At the very least, the Demon King showed no sign of realizing otherwise. Angel asked what would happen if those memories proved false. Remilia replied that the only thing at stake would be the life of one foolish woman who had paid the price for meddling with the source of the world's suffering. From Angel's perspective, it would appear that someone consumed by malice had manipulated those around her and perhaps been banished for it. She then explained that the only way to purify the creator of the world was to destroy his body, which had been irreversibly corrupted by the miasma, and purify the heart contained within. Angel was horrified by the proposal and questioned whether she truly understood the weight of suggesting the destruction of the creator's body. The creator was the god who had brought their world into existence. If Remilia failed, death alone would not be sufficient punishment. She might instead be condemned to a fate of unimaginable suffering. Remilia apologized, but no matter what happened, no matter what judgment God passed upon her, and no matter what fate awaited her, none of it could compare to her unwavering faith that Emmy would save the world. It was a conviction she trusted above all else. Remilia then knelt before Angel and earnestly requested that he lend her the key in his possession that unlocked the shrine of the creator of the world. Angel replied that the key was a national treasure and could not simply be loaned to anyone. Remilia looked at him in silence, unable to understand why he would still hesitate after everything she had revealed. Without another word, Angel turned and began to walk away before stopping. The two met each other's gaze. After a brief pause, Angel announced that he would accompany her himself. Remilia reacted with visible confusion and surprise, while the attendant standing nearby was equally stunned. Chapter 10 continued with Klimt reacting in surprise. He could hardly believe that his brother intended to go. Angel told him to calm down and not misunderstand his decision, explaining that he still did not trust Remilia. However, since she had not lied to him so far, he intended to keep watching her until she finally did. Remilia reflected that, compared to completely obliterating the Lord of the Heavens, destroying the Creator's body would be relatively simple, while preserving the Creator's heart intact would be the truly difficult part. Having the Demon King's strength at her disposal would be more than welcome. Angel extended his hand, and Remilia accepted it with gratitude. Quietly to herself, she noted that he could glare at her as much as he wished, but he would never find a lie. Her gratitude toward him was entirely genuine. Not long afterward, Klimt escorted Remilia to the room where she would be staying. He explained that preparations would begin the following day and asked her to spend the night there. He also informed her that dinner would be prepared shortly and asked her to come to the dining hall later, adding that she was free to use anything in the room as she pleased. Remilia thanked him for showing her around, and Klimt modestly dismissed her gratitude before taking his leave. Once he was gone, Remilia immediately examined the room. She concluded that it was still better than camping out in the wilderness. Considering the state of the castle, however, she shuddered to imagine what might be served for dinner. Meanwhile, Klimt worked alone in the kitchen, preparing a meal from the limited ingredients available. Remilia soon appeared at the doorway. Klimt explained that dinner was still being prepared and was not yet ready. Apologizing for interrupting, Remilia asked whether there were no kitchen staff. Klimt explained that only he, his brother, and the gate guards remained in the castle. Since the others would not have reacted well to a human guest, all of the aides and servants had been temporarily assigned to various official duties. Remilia quietly reflected that openly revealing how severely understaffed the castle was hardly seemed wise, though she supposed Klimt was simply implying that neither he nor the Demon King required guards to deal with a single human girl. Remilia remarked that, in that case, she might have prepared a little too thoroughly. Curious, Klimt wondered what she meant. In the next moment, a large crate filled with ingredients appeared beside them, leaving him staring in astonishment. Remilia explained that now she knew the castle's coordinates, she could summon all the supplies she had prepared beforehand. Every ingredient had been produced within her own fief. She offered them as a small token celebrating their new friendship. Looking over the fresh vegetables, dried meat, fish, and preserved foods, Klimt sincerely thanked her. Remilia added that if he was concerned about poison, she could serve as a taste tester. Klimt remarked that he doubted human poisons would have any effect on demons, though he welcomed her assistance with preparing dinner. Remilia concluded that bringing the ingredients had been the right decision. Before long, a generous feast had been laid across the dining table. Angel dryly wondered whether Klimt intended it to be his final meal. Klimt explained that Remilia had provided all of the ingredients as a gesture of friendship. Angel took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and found the food delicious. Klimt further explained that everything on the table had come from the land Remilia governed. In other words, the meal had been prepared using crops cultivated, livestock raised, and fish caught by the very children who had escaped from the demon realm. For the first time, Angel experienced food of such quality and quietly acknowledged it. At the same time, in her room, Remilia let out a soft chuckle. She recalled that, unlike every other dungeon in the game, the Creator's dungeon contained neither monsters nor treasure, only the fallen god himself. The battle's mechanics revolved not only around advanced actions but also around purification, which had to be cast once every 5 turns. Otherwise, a random party member would succumb to the frenzy. Although demons possessed greater resistance to the frenzy than humans, they were incapable of using purification magic. That meant she would have to cast it on the Demon King during tomorrow's battle. If the demons had ever found a human capable of using purification magic, none of them would have fallen victim to the frenzy. They could simply have threatened or kidnapped such a person. Remilia intended to reveal this alternative only after Renge had purified the Creator. If Angel learned of it now, he would surely be consumed by bitter regret. The Lord of the Heavens had sealed away the goddess of purification, leaving the demons with no way of even knowing that purification magic existed. For that reason, Remilia intended to say only what was necessary so they would believe there had truly been nothing more they could have done. She wanted them to believe they had exhausted every possible option throughout their long history of struggle. Above all, she wished to protect the spirit of the Demon King, Angel, who had been forced to become ruthless for the sake of his people. To herself, she reflected that this was what Emmy would have done. The scene shifted to Angel and Remilia preparing for their expedition over a map spread across a table. Once they were ready to depart, Remilia reminded him of what they had discussed earlier and cast the spell. Angel immediately recognized it as purification magic and noticed that his body felt strangely lighter. Remilia explained that, according to her memories, purification magic could partially lessen the oppressive force of divine judgment. She suspected that her ability to wield it was precisely why she had been chosen to receive those divine revelations. She told him that she would continue casting purification magic to shield him from divine judgment while he focused entirely on attacking. Once the Creator's body, corrupted by miasma, had been destroyed, she would summon the goddess of purification, Renge, to purify the Creator's heart. Angel understood that, afterward, the entire world would be purified as part of her plan to save everyone. Remilia confirmed that this was exactly her intention. Angel responded with a quiet sound that caught Remilia off guard. For a moment, she wondered if he had just smiled. He reflected that he could hardly believe the day had come when he would stand beside a human girl to save not only the demon realm but the entire world. After a brief silence, Remilia explained that humans and demons had originally been one and the same. Demonkind had arisen from those who naturally possessed greater resistance to the miasma, and those survivors had passed those traits on through successive generations. She compared it to animals in colder climates, whose thicker fur was not an inherent characteristic but the result of generations of individuals with that trait reproducing with one another, allowing their descendants a greater chance of survival. As proof, she pointed out that humans exposed to miasma for too long lost their sanity, much like demons. Some died because their bodies could not endure the transformation, while others became the very monsters Angel knew so well. She further noted that humans and demons were capable of having children together, as demonstrated by the first prince of her own country, proving that their bodies were not fundamentally different. Angel questioned what she meant by all of this. Remilia explained that humans and demons differed only slightly because of the lands in which they had been born. Because of that, she genuinely believed the two races could stand side by side and build a peaceful world together. The two arrived before the great sealed doors of the shrine. Remilia asked whether he was ready. Rather than answering directly, Angel asked her to call him by his name. Caught off guard, Remilia reacted with surprise. Angel simply stated that his name was Angel before stepping through the doors. Remilia initially wondered whether he simply wanted a shorter name to use in the heat of battle, but she quickly dismissed that thought. Throughout this journey, she had embodied Emi's ideals by becoming the Remilia who continued striving to save the world without expecting any reward, even while everyone branded her a villainess. It seemed that the Demon King had begun to grow fond of that persona. Realizing this, she decided she could make use of it. From now on, she would begin showing him Remilia as a girl so wholly devoted to saving the world that she remained oblivious to the feelings blossoming around her. It would not be a lie, because she was certain that description suited Emi perfectly. Chapter 11 continued with the two of them teleporting to another location. Remilia observed that there was nothing there. Angel appeared to be making effective use of his shadow magic. Considering the amount of cover provided by the obstacles throughout the limestone cavern, Remilia concluded that channeling magic into a single powerful weapon would be the most effective approach, which suited their circumstances well. Angel remarked that the creator did not seem to have come to welcome them. Remilia suggested that the creator might be hiding somewhere within the cave. According to her memories, they should have encountered him the moment they entered, but she reasoned that the discrepancy was likely because they had arrived much earlier than they had in those memories. Sensing the creator's exact location was difficult, as the entire cavern was saturated with his energy. Rather than searching the caves recklessly, she decided it would be wiser to remain where they were and wait for the creator to investigate the intrusion himself. Without warning, something tightened around Remilia's neck. A massive, grotesque creature emerged above her, its body covered in bulbous growths with countless thin tendrils trailing from it. Alarmed, Angel rushed to her aid as the tendrils seized Remilia and dragged her upward. Drawing her sword, she cut herself free and fell back toward the ground. Angel immediately struck the creature, shattering part of its body. Remilia landed safely as the severed mass crashed down beside her. Angel remarked on the creature's incredible speed. Remilia reflected that her earlier concern had been unfounded. She had wondered whether the Demon King would hesitate before striking the god he had worshipped, but he had shown no such hesitation. Angel observed that Remilia's reflexes had remained remarkably sharp even after being caught by the neck, concluding that her claims of slaying gods had not been empty bravado. The eye-like creature quickly regenerated, its tendrils spreading outward once more. Both Remilia and Angel reacted in surprise as the threat returned. Moving swiftly, Remilia judged that the attacks were not dangerous enough to warrant defensive magic, though they still could not be ignored. She wondered how Angel intended to respond. Remaining calm, Angel used his shadow as a shield while launching another attack. Watching him, Remilia noted that he was indeed using his shadow defensively. Moments later, numerous small objects began falling around them. Angel briefly wondered whether they were seeds before dark tendrils suddenly ensnared him. Realizing he had been too careless, he struggled as Remilia immediately cut through the vines. A burst of light scattered the tendrils, leaving Angel momentarily confused. Remilia instructed him to keep a clear path open for her and concentrate on striking the creature's main body as they had planned. Once he did, she would purify it. She swiftly maneuvered through the chaos of battle while Angel reflected on how long it had been since he had fought alongside someone, both relying on another and being relied upon in return. A tremendous blow shattered the surrounding rock and debris. Standing ready with her weapon, Remilia immediately pressed forward, driving her strike into the creature's great eye. A voice from within the monster quietly remarked that it hurt a little. The great eye writhed before the entire body burst apart into countless smaller fragments, scattering under the force of the attack. Remilia stood amid the fading debris as the threat dispersed. She immediately called for Angel to act. Stepping forward, Angel addressed the being before him as the creator of the world and his lord. Writhing in agony, the creature begged them to kill it, repeating its plea over and over. Remilia understood how deeply the creator loved all demons, all humans, and the world itself. Angel raised his weapon and shattered the creator's dark form. Though he reflected that this world had been nurtured as though it were the creator's own child, he resolved that he would never allow the creator to destroy it. Remilia observed that Angel was even more skilled than she had expected. Thanks to his ability, she could keep more of her own cards hidden. She reflected that she had put on quite a convincing display of desperation and wondered whether it had truly appeared as though she had been fighting with everything she had. Angel honestly admitted to himself that he had never expected to survive this battle, even if they emerged victorious. The creature reformed once again, its single eye glaring as it rose from the dark waters. Standing together, Angel realized that he had never understood how much easier battle became when someone fought at his side. Remilia explained that this fish-like form was the creator's final line of defense before its heart would be exposed. As they had planned, she would take over from there. She had compressed the purifying flame into the smallest sphere possible, and all that remained was to place it within the creature's body so it could purify the corruption from the inside. To accomplish that, she needed to push it into the creature's stomach, and she instructed Angel to overturn the creature. As Angel watched her move, he found himself thinking that even while performing something as profane and grotesque as cutting open the belly of a god, Remilia still appeared to be the very embodiment of a saint. Holding the radiant sphere of purifying light, she carefully guided it into the exposed wound. Brilliant light spread through the creature, dissolving the dark corruption from within. Bathed in that radiance, Remilia appeared to Angel as the very image of sainthood. It had only been through blessings as great as those of their Lord and Creator that demonkind had been able to survive until now. Angel offered a sincere prayer that the Creator might finally be freed from the miasma and the unimaginable suffering it had endured. He wished for the being to rest and prayed that, through Remilia's purifying light, it would one day return more majestic than ever. The Creator's dark form dissolved, leaving behind only a single sphere. Remilia declared that their task was complete. All that remained was to purify the shrine and summon the goddess of purification, Renge. She told Angel that none of it would have been possible without his help and sincerely thanked him for fighting beside her. Inwardly, she playfully hoped that Angel would spend the rest of his long life telling the entire world how bravely Remilia had fought to protect it. Angel quietly corrected her by reminding her to call him Angel. Remilia reacted with brief confusion before thanking him once more, this time addressing him as King Angel. Angel gently dismissed the formality, believing it only natural that he should fight for his people. If anything, he felt he was the one who owed her his gratitude. Remilia pleaded with him not to thank her, insisting that she had only done what she believed she had to do and required no recognition. Angel asked her to let him speak. Calling her by name, he sincerely thanked her. Remilia accepted his gratitude in kind, welcomed his words, and quietly reflected that, as Emmy's Remilia, this was simply what she was meant to do. She then proposed that they begin preparing for the summoning. Chapter 12 continued with Remilia and Angel summoning the goddess of purification. Remilia channeled light into the surrounding space, filling the cavern with a gentle radiance. As she touched the surface of the water, a white lotus bloomed beneath her hand. Standing beside her, Angel watched as Lady Renge emerged, her face concealed beneath a great lotus blossom. Remilia presented the sphere to her, indicating that the Creator had been brought before her. Renge gazed upon the being within the sphere and softly addressed him as her father, lamenting his pitiful condition. She transformed the monstrous form into a tiny creature before gently reassuring him that, although he had become much smaller, they would continue working hard until he grew strong once more. Angel observed the scene in silence. Renge then turned to Angel, addressing him as the king of demons. She explained that faith was the very source of a god's existence. As long as a god's core remained intact and there were those who continued to believe that God could return again and again. That was how her father had been able to resurrect in this form, and it stood as proof that, even in humanity's darkest days, the demons had never abandoned their faith in him. As his daughter, she offered Angel her deepest gratitude. Angel knelt before her, believing she honored him far more than he deserved. Addressing her as the goddess of purification, he reflected that it had only been through the Creator's generous guidance that demonkind had been able to survive in such a harsh land. He remembered how the Creator had calmed mountains of fire, dispersed deadly poisons, and even diverted falling stars. The demons had always known that the Creator had wielded powers far beyond their own to shield them from countless disasters. Renge responded with quiet sorrow, confessing that she still could not restore her father or cleanse away the accumulated burden of his labor. That failure had caused them unimaginable suffering. She wondered why Angel harbored neither resentment nor hatred toward her when she believed she had betrayed the faith that had been placed in her. Angel listened without speaking, his expression calm and understanding. At the beginning of the disaster, some demons had believed that the gods had abandoned them. Those who had received the blessings of various deities had sensed those divine powers steadily weakening. When that divine protection vanished completely, they instinctively understood that the God who had blessed them had perished. It was never that the gods had abandoned their followers. Rather, something catastrophic had shaken the very realm of the gods themselves. Remilia concluded that this must have been when the Lord of the Heavens, intoxicated by the power he had seized after imprisoning Lady Renge, began killing the gods who opposed him. Renge explained that as the gods died, so too did the demons who placed their faith in them, creating a downward spiral that destroyed both together. Even so, despite everything, there were still demons who had continued believing in her father. Turning to Remilia, Renge declared that none of this would have been possible without her defeat of the Lord of the Heavens. In recognition of that deed, she bestowed upon Remilia the title of Purification Maiden. Remilia stood stunned. Though she smiled outwardly, inwardly she wished Renge would keep the title for herself, especially since it had originally been meant for the Star Maiden. She politely refused it, believing herself unworthy of such an honor. Angel, however, felt there was no title more fitting for Remilia. Internally, she wanted him to stop. Even as part of her act, she had no desire to be called by that title. She could hardly believe she was being forced to follow this portion of the Star Maiden's story as well. To her, it felt as though Emmy's Remilia was being made to wear the Star Maiden's filthy hand-me-downs. Yet, seeing the warm expressions on the faces of Angel, Renge, and even the tiny creator, she felt she had little choice but to accept the moment. Thus, with both the miasma and the frenzy finally resolved, a peaceful spring unlike any seen in many years spread throughout the demon realm. The scene shifted to two figures running swiftly across the ground. They leaped high into the air, overjoyed by how light their bodies felt. One marveled that his body felt just as light as it had earlier that day, while the other admired the unusually clear sky. Laughing with excitement, they continued running until one of them suddenly stumbled and crashed to the ground. The other teased him for trying to show off and called him clumsy, but when the fallen youth failed to get back up, his amusement quickly faded. Concerned, he asked whether he had actually been hurt. Instead of answering, the fallen youth stared in surprise at the flowers blooming nearby. Amazed, he remarked that he had never seen them blossom so beautifully before and eagerly urged his companion to search for more. Without warning, a massive creature burst from the ground. The earth erupted around them as debris flew through the air, leaving both of them frozen in shock. One immediately drew his sword and swung at the creature, but the attack accomplished nothing. The other could only stammer in panic as the first scolded him for throwing away his weapon, reminding him that he now had nothing left to fight with. As the creature lashed out, both believed they were about to die. Suddenly, something struck the monster. Clinging tightly to one another, the two watched in confusion as the creature writhed violently. Their confusion quickly turned to alarm when it burst into flames. A towering pillar of fire erupted from the ground, engulfing the creature until it finally collapsed, motionless. A figure approached and checked whether they were unharmed. Standing together in the valley were Remilia and Angel. The two youths stared in astonishment. One immediately recognized Angel as their king, while both looked curiously at the beautiful young woman standing beside him. Later, Remilia and Angel walked together across the land. Remilia explained that although the source of the miasma had been purified, traces of it still lingered throughout the demon realm. Angel acknowledged that he could already sense the miasma weakening day by day, though it would still take time before it disappeared entirely. Remilia replied that the quickest solution was to travel from place to place and purify the remaining miasma directly. Privately, she reflected that after receiving the title of Purification Maiden, she had been guided toward cleansing the land of its lingering corruption. What she had not expected was for Angel to insist on accompanying her. Even so, she appreciated his presence, as she was unfamiliar with the demon realm. News that the source of the miasma and the frenzy had been eliminated spread throughout the demon realm by means of magical communication, much like telepathy. The gathered demons learned that the miracle had only been possible because of a human woman who had received the guidance of the gods. One of the two youths reacted in amazement, remarking that he had never met a human before. The other wondered whether Remilia was the woman their chief had mentioned. Together, they thanked her for saving the demon kingdom. Remilia quietly noted to herself that news of Remilia's accomplishments was spreading with remarkable speed. As they continued toward their destination, Angel remarked that he had never seen those children so full of energy before. He explained that both had been identified at a young age as possessing exceptional magical talent and had therefore been training to become future warriors. Before long, however, even children without strong magical abilities would be able to live peacefully in the demon realm. Remilia replied that when that day arrived, she hoped the people living in her own territory would finally be able to return home as well. Remilia found herself thinking of Thorn and remarked to herself that his reaction to her report had been rather amusing. She recalled speaking with him through a glowing basin used for magical communication. Upon hearing that she had destroyed the source of the miasma, resolved the frenzy crisis, and even discovered a cure for it all within a single day, Thorn had been utterly stunned. He had repeatedly questioned whether she was joking, while Remilia could only laugh at his disbelief. Neither she nor Angel had revealed to Thorn or the other demons that the Creator had truly been the source of both the miasma and the frenzy. Since the demon's faith was the source of the Creator's strength, undermining that faith would only hinder his recovery. Instead, they told everyone that an evil god had been responsible for all their suffering. According to the story, this evil god had sought to engulf the world in miasma, cursing all living things with the frenzy. The Creator had fought against that evil god to protect his people, gradually exhausting his own power in the process. Only after the Demon King and a certain human girl defeated the evil god had the Creator finally been able to begin recovering his strength. Some time later, Angel led Remilia to another location, telling her they had arrived. Remilia immediately observed that the land was still deeply stained with miasma. The surrounding earth had been darkened by corruption, so she began channeling her power to cleanse it. Radiant light spread across the land, steadily driving back the lingering darkness. Once the purification was complete, she reasoned that the cleansed water would naturally flow through the connected rivers and wells, allowing its effects to spread throughout the region. Watching the light restore the land, Angel reflected that Remilia had truly done so much for demonkind. As the Demon King, he could not imagine how he might ever repay everything she had done for his people. Realizing the opportunity had arrived, Remilia asked him not to think that way. She insisted that she had merely followed the revelations she had been given and nothing more. Angel, however, maintained that, as the leader of the demons who owed her so much, he wanted to do something in return. Remilia smiled and admitted that there was one thing she wished to ask. Though momentarily puzzled, Angel encouraged her to ask freely. Remilia then inquired whether there was any way to remove the false emotions caused by a love potion so she could expose the scheme of the person who had framed and exiled her. Angel fell silent. Remilia reflected that developing a cure through human pharmaceutical knowledge alone would be extremely difficult. Since the demons had originally created the love potion, it would be far more practical to leave such a task to them. As part of her act, she allowed herself to appear quiet and uncertain. After a long hesitation and a weary sigh, Angel finally asked whether she still had feelings for the man named Willard. Caught by surprise, Remilia answered that she did not. Even if false affection had been forced upon him, she could not accept that all the trust they had built together had been discarded so easily. Had he truly been completely brainwashed, she believed she might have been able to forgive him. As matters stood, however, she could not. Hearing her answer, Angel immediately understood her feelings. Angel remarked that Remilia was truly a generous person for thinking that way after everything she had endured. Remilia merely gave a quiet huff. Inwardly, she could not help but scoff at how completely Angel had misunderstood her. She wondered whether generosity was truly how he saw her, and whether he genuinely believed she was merciful simply because she intended to let the one who had harmed Emmy continue living instead of killing her outright. To Remilia, death would have been far too lenient. What she desired was a punishment so severe that her enemy would one day beg for death. Only a lifetime of suffering would ever satisfy her. Remilia then recalled another piece of knowledge she had inherited from the girl who was meant to save the world. According to those memories, there existed a certain item capable of manipulating the emotions of demons and even leaving them mentally crippled. She advised Angel that the ingredients required to produce it should be banned immediately. In her memories, the only known use for such an item had been raising demon characters in the game. She carefully explained the materials and process used to create it. Angel realized that those ingredients were currently being exported because they were valuable components for producing powerful potions. Until now, he had never imagined they could also be used for something so dangerous. Understanding the risk, he agreed without hesitation. Remilia thanked him, acknowledging that banning them would likely deprive his people of an important source of income. Angel dismissed the concern, believing there was no justification for placing short-term profits above the long-term well-being of his people. Afterward, Angel suggested they return. Remilia allowed herself a faint smirk. With this decision, Pina had lost her only reliable means of manipulating demons. Now, only one final step remained. Calling Angel's attention once more, Remilia explained that there was one final favor she wished to ask. She wanted to construct something that would both compensate for the lost trade revenue and allow her to continue purifying the demon realm while also managing her own territory. Angel admitted that he had assumed she would remain in the demon realm during the purification effort while leaving her territory in Thorn's capable hands. Even so, if there was anything he could do to ease her burden, he was willing to help. Remilia acknowledged that Thorn was exceptionally competent, but the project she had in mind required extensive work that she would need to oversee personally. When Angel asked what the project was, Remilia revealed that she intended to construct a teleportation gate. It would permanently connect her territory with the demon realm, opening a path between humans and demons for the first time in history. Within her heart, Remilia reflected that the hour of reckoning had finally arrived for those who had dared to harm Emmy. Extending her hand toward Angel, she proposed that they formalize the beginning of that future by signing a trade agreement between their two peoples. Chapter 13 opened before a grand castle built atop jagged rock formations. Inside, Mizari greeted Remilia, introduced herself, and expressed her pleasure at finally meeting her. Remilia gently corrected her by saying the pleasure was all hers. Mizari replied that there was no need for such formality and asked Remilia to simply call her Mizari. Remilia agreed and invited her to call her Remilia as well. Mizari then knelt and sincerely thanked Remilia for saving their homeland and its people. Caught by surprise, Remilia also knelt and took Mizari's hand, explaining that she had only done what anyone would have done. Tears began to fall from Mizari's eyes, prompting Remilia's concern. Overcome with joy, Mizari felt as though she was about to burst and asked for permission to embrace her. Remilia agreed, and Mizari hugged her tightly while expressing her heartfelt gratitude. Remilia accepted her thanks, and inwardly reflected that she was acting exactly like Emmy. Meanwhile, Thorn wondered what was happening as he found himself invited to the meeting through the magical sink. Remilia then proposed moving on to the day's main topic. She explained that, in order to facilitate trade between the demon realm and her land, they needed to discuss the construction of a teleportation gate, which would be critical to their logistic. Thorn visibly despaired, feeling as though he had been dragged into something far beyond his pay grade. The meeting began. Angel asked what a teleportation gate actually was. Remilia explained that it differed from ordinary teleportation magic because it would allow both people and goods to pass through freely without any limitations. Angel struggled to believe that such a thing was even possible. Remilia continued by explaining that teleportation magic was normally limited to a very small number of specialists or the use of rare items. Even then, a specialist could only teleport those with more mana than themselves, and the spell itself consumed an exhausting amount of mana. In contrast, as long as the gate had fixed coordinates, anyone could travel through it. Klimt asked whether that meant it relied on a form of human magic different from demon magic. Remilia replied that he was halfway correct, explaining that it would combine the teleportation magic of demons with the summoning magic of humans. Mizari remarked that it was exciting to think the wisdom of two different worlds could be combined to bring them together, calling it a beautiful thought. Remilia acknowledged her remark while privately thinking that the method was actually based on a completely forbidden form of magic intended solely for summoning demons. She recalled that the Remilia from the game had once used summoning magic to bring Angel into the human realm to wreak havoc. Mizari then asked how Remilia intended to create such a fusion of magic. Remilia explained that she would rely on the memories she had gained from the girl who would save the world. Various rare and magical materials were laid out before them. Remilia explained that, guided by those memories, she had gathered the items from all over the world for the sake of constructing the teleportation gate. Klimt reacted with shock, remarking that Remilia was far too well prepared. Remilia then held up a written plan, explaining that the construction method was recorded within it. Klimt could only reaffirm that she was indeed too well prepared. Mizari began examining the materials while enthusiastically explaining their uses, eventually concluding that the project should be entirely possible. Klimt and Angel silently admitted to themselves that they could not understand a single word of her explanation. Remilia then stated that they would need to build a pair of gates, one there and one within her own territory, and expressed her hope of relying on Mizari to oversee the construction of the gate on the demon side. Mizari agreed, noting that the construction would also provide work for skilled demons. Angel then asked if there was anything he could do to help. Remilia replied that she wanted him to oversee the preparation of the actual trade goods and, if possible, compile a list of products that could be produced in the demon lands along with estimates of what could be exported. Angel readily accepted the task. Klimt then suggested that Remilia leave the physical surveying to him. He explained that he would investigate the current state of the kingdom's ore and mineral deposits, as well as its native animal and plant life. He added that he could use monsters to travel quickly while conducting the survey. Remilia thanked them and emphasized that their highest priorities were plants capable of producing silk or paper and medicinal herbs. She also explained that she would send an assistant from her territory to explain the differences between the human and demon realms. Klimt remarked that such assistance would be a great help. Remilia then stated that, on their side, Thorn would explain what they could offer through the exchange. Thorn reported that their territory could provide 2,500 tons of food, along with another 2,500 tons of wheat purchased from associated granaries. Altogether, it would be enough to feed the entire demon population of 30,000 people for more than a year. Klimt reacted with surprise at the sheer quantity. Angel recalled hearing that Remilia's territory was only a small village in an undeveloped region and wondered how such an amount was possible. Remilia explained that it was only possible because of the demons who had come to her village. She went on to explain that the cornerstone industry of her territory, and the source of most of its income, was the production and sale of compost. By using the demons' magical abilities, the compost could be fermented and mixed far more effectively. She added that even the demons who had fled to the human realm were relatively weak compared to those who had remained behind, yet they still possessed far more mana than the average human. As a result, the compost they produced had become revolutionary for agriculture. Thorne added that, according to the reports they had received, farms using their compost had seen crop yields increase by 30% compared to previous years. Because of that surplus, they would be able to purchase grain in bulk and export it to the demon realm once the gate was completed. Mizari remarked that it was amazing and found it remarkable that the children who had once struggled merely to survive in the shadows had grown into people capable of helping their homeland. She wept as she reflected on how hard they had all worked. Thorne recalled telling them that this had been the best way to save as many lives as possible. He had explained that the curse took a long time to affect those with strong magic, giving them time to search for a cure. At the same time, the demons who had escaped to the human realm could serve as test subjects, allowing them to develop a cure and eventually send it back home. He had believed that, perhaps one day, they would find a way to save everyone from the living hell their homeland had become and create a future where they would no longer have to kill friends and family who succumbed to the frenzy. Thorne concluded that everything had been made possible thanks to Lady Remilia. On that note, Thorne cleared his throat and asked Remilia where she intended to build the teleportation gate, adding that if he knew its size, he could scout a suitable location. Remilia replied that it would be built near the bridge. She explained that she had ordered the bridge to be large enough to accommodate wagon lanes in both directions specifically for this purpose. Thorne recalled that Remilia had instructed him to submit plans for only a small bridge intended for local agricultural use, and that he had concealed the truth from the government at her request. He realized that this had been the reason. Thorne then pointed out that, if they had intended to secretly smuggle goods back and forth, it would have been better to construct a much smaller bridge. He also noted that surveillance agents were present in the village. Remilia then called to Mr. Thorne and asked whether he had forgotten the promise they had made. Thorne reacted with confusion at the mention of a promise. Remilia declared that she would make it once again. She stated to the demons that she was offering them the chance to work in peace and live like kings. Hearing those words, Thorne recognized them as the same ones Remilia had spoken when they first met. Remilia pointed out that no one had ever heard of peaceful work being done in the shadows or of a king who smuggled goods under the cover of night. She explained that, if they hoped to one day sign a proper trade agreement between their nations, everyone would first have to recognize the demon kingdom as an equal. Angel reacted in surprise at the mention of countries. Mizari admitted that such an outcome would be wonderful but questioned whether a human nation could truly trust a demon realm that had appeared out of nowhere. Klimt added that humans generally viewed all demons as monsters. Remilia explained that, to achieve that goal, they should begin on a smaller scale by limiting the trade to her village. Humans naturally feared the unknown, but their perceptions were always shaped by whatever benefited them. The goods produced through this trade would gradually spread to neighboring towns and foreign cities. As people came to trust the quality of those goods and the village they all appeared to come from, that trust would continue to grow. Once the village had established itself as the sole source of these novel and superior products, they could slowly reveal that they had actually been created by demons. From there, word would spread, transforming humanity's perception of demons from the monsters of legend into something entirely different. By making use of the influence of Thorne's former customers, the nobles who held grudges against the Star Maiden, they could also pressure any potential rivals out of business. When cultural exchange between humans and demons had taken root and the time was right, the king himself would surely reach out. The group fell silent for a moment before Mizari let out a brief laugh. She remarked that, when Remilia explained it that way, it sounded like the easiest thing in the world. Klimt observed that, compared to defeating a god and purifying the entire land of miasma, perhaps it was not such a great challenge after all. Remilia agreed that, compared to enduring centuries of darkness, it was truly nothing. Silence settled over the group once more before they all burst into laughter. Inwardly, Remilia reflected that it truly was nothing by comparison. Remilia thought that, after living in misery for so long, it was difficult for them to imagine a bright future, and they were completely unaware of their own immense value. By allowing the wider world to interact with the beautiful demons, she would not merely establish trust but create worshippers. She silently resolved to make full use of every one of them. All of humanity would eventually become utterly dependent upon the irreplaceable merchants of the demon kingdom, and the reins of that continental trade monopoly would be held from her own land. Angel called Remilia's name and remarked that she seemed genuinely excited about the plan. Remilia confirmed that she was, explaining that if the trade succeeded, they would be one step closer to her dream. When Angel asked what that dream was, Remilia revealed that she wished to create a world where someone like Emmy, with a kind heart, could live in peace. Angel immediately understood. He realized that this was what she had meant all along and wondered if her intention was to achieve it by saving the world. The scene shifted to a city filled with tall buildings, with a grand castle rising in the distance. Two girls walked together, intending to visit a shoe shop that one of them knew was just around the corner. Their steps came to a halt when they noticed a commotion ahead. A crowd had gathered around a stall, with people shouting at one another not to cut in line while demanding bowls for themselves. An older man angrily confronted another, accusing him of already receiving his share. The other man angrily insisted that he had not received anything yet. The two girls watched the scene in confusion, wondering what was happening. A man approached them, apologized for the interruption, and advised them to take a different route. He explained that food had been distributed there quite frequently in recent days. The girls wondered why food was being handed out on one of the capital's main streets and speculated that it must be a royal initiative to aid the poor. As they looked toward the stall, they recognized the woman overseeing the distribution. The crowd continued to shove and call out for additional portions. The woman calmly assured everyone that there was no need to fight because there was more than enough for all. It was then revealed that the one carrying out the charitable work was the Star Maiden. Chapter 14 began at a grand stone castle rising against the sky. Inside, a woman informed Willard that she had received many complaints regarding the Star Maiden's expensive clothing and questioned whether she had not taught him to grant rewards according to merit. Willard replied that many of their new policies and perspectives had come from the knowledge Pina had brought them, and he believed that, in time, her ideas would help shape the country's future. The woman acknowledged his answer and remarked that her expectations were high. Willard affirmed this. The woman then questioned what practical value the saint had provided beyond those ideas. Willard explained that Pina had repeatedly expressed her desire to travel with him and his retainers to subjugate dungeons throughout the world, but because he had been occupied with political affairs and royal duties, he had kept her within the palace. He added that monster attacks had not caused nearly as many casualties as they had in the past. Furthermore, if a member of the royal family suddenly began conquering dungeons across the continent, both the adventurer guilds and foreign governments would object. He also could not allow her to travel without him, as it would be inappropriate for a prince's fiancée to journey alongside a group of male retainers. The woman pointed out that the kingdom had no shortage of outstanding female officers. She then wondered whether Pina had changed her wish to limit dungeon expeditions to those within their own borders while accompanied by such elite women, questioning whether she herself had overlooked the issue. Willard explained that Pina had insisted she needed to gather a select group of people in order to prevent the coming calamity. The woman remarked that there had been little sign of any such calamity so far before asking where exactly his saint was at that very moment. Willard hesitated to answer. The scene returned to the bustling city, where a large crowd had gathered around the food stall. One man remarked on the enormous crowd and wondered where the saint distributing free food was. Another commented that he had heard about it and had been eager to see it for himself. A third observed that the food was far better than he had expected. Pina continued handing out bowls, presenting the Star Maiden's specially made risotto for everyone to enjoy. An onlooker remarked that it looked delicious. Privately, Pina was pleased that the line remained so long. She believed that as long as she continued feeding them, the commoners would be like putty in her hands. She thought that even without special items, she could become as popular as she wished. As she handed another bowl to a recipient, she reminded him to be careful because it was still very hot. She reflected that, even if she could not go on adventures, everyone would still adore her as the saint with a heart of gold. She also believed that, once news of her growing reputation spread, more and more of the boys from the game would come rushing to the capital to see her. After letting out a quiet breath, Pina announced that she was taking a short break. At that moment, a man approached while speaking admiringly of their wonderful Star Maiden. Pina turned her attention to him, wondering what he wanted. The man expressed that he had been deeply moved by the way Pina had taken it upon herself to feed the people. He added that he was certain meals prepared by the beloved Star Maiden of the gods would bring untold blessings. Inwardly, Pina agreed with the sentiment despite knowing that she had not personally prepared a single bowl. She explained that she had acted only because she wished for everyone's happiness, hoping the food would improve their health and ease their worries. The man reacted with amazement, saying he had thought as much. He then held out a box before hesitating. Pina wondered whether it contained a love letter. Instead, when she opened it, she found gems and money inside. The man confessed that he had never truly been given the chance to demonstrate his abilities. He believed people should appreciate him more, but perhaps he was simply less fortunate than others, or maybe those around him understood his talent and deliberately held him back out of jealousy. He blamed them for preventing him from reaching his potential or living up to his parents' expectations. Pina instructed him to hold out his hand. She placed a glowing feather into his palm and gently held his hand. She told him to offer a prayer to the feather every day and instructed him not to tell anyone about it because she was only giving it to him because he was special. She explained that, in order to bring the same kind of good fortune upon himself, it was important for the power of his prayers to reach heaven. The feather was merely a small aid along the way, while the most important thing was for him to genuinely believe in its power. She finished with a playful wink. The man thanked her profusely and vowed to praise her and pray to the gods every moment for the rest of his life. Inwardly, Pina dismissed him as a fool, knowing that the Star Maiden possessed no such power. She then reflected that, although the palace treasury officer had become a constant nuisance, she had now found a way to fill her wallet. Elsewhere, Claude remarked that he had never heard of rotational-style agriculture before. Willard explained that the knowledge Pina had received from the gods could apparently improve crop yields significantly and handed Claude a report. Claude admitted that it sounded remarkable and asked what the method involved. Willard asked whether Claude understood that repeatedly planting the same crop in a field gradually depleted the nutrients required for its growth. Claude confirmed that he did, explaining that this eventually made the land increasingly difficult to cultivate, which was why they already rotated the crops grown in each field from year to year. Willard agreed but explained that the proposed system went further by dividing farmland into 3 separate sections and rotating their cultivation, giving the method its name. Wheat would be grown in summer, barley in winter, and one field would remain unused each season so the soil could recover. Claude then asked what Pina intended to change. Willard explained that she proposed sowing crops for livestock feed in the field that would normally be left fallow. Claude questioned whether the field was not supposed to rest. After a brief hesitation, Willard explained that Pina had assured him it would be fine as long as livestock were allowed to graze there, since their droppings would serve as fertilizer. Claude immediately understood, observing that producing fodder would naturally increase the number of livestock, making it a highly efficient use of the land instead of leaving it idle. Greater food self-sufficiency would strengthen the nation's foundation. He added that, if the reform proved successful, it would also help silence much of the criticism that both they and Pina had recently been receiving. Willard noted that Pina's extravagant shopping sprees had certainly done little to improve their public image. Claude remarked that it was rumored the treasury officer had complained that Pina was trying to swallow the entire annual budget. Willard replied that it was important for their saint to always look her best, if only for the dignity of their nation. Claude agreed. Willard continued by suggesting that her behavior was probably just a reaction to suddenly acquiring wealth after growing up as a commoner. As nobles, he believed they should be more magnanimous and understanding. He then asked Claude whether he had heard the recent rumors. Claude replied that some people had begun saying it had been a mistake to exile Willard's sister, Remilia. Willard dismissed the idea as nonsense. He insisted that he had given Remilia more than enough opportunities to apologize and that she herself had chosen to throw those chances away. He explained that he had always believed Remy to be intelligent and kind, the very image of a perfect woman, making her hateful side all the more disappointing. In his view, a woman who allowed jealousy to consume her to the point of committing such a crime had no right to become the mother of an entire nation. Claude agreed. Willard maintained that he had done nothing wrong. He questioned how someone in such a position could allow emotions to overcome reason. Claude added that such behavior would create endless diplomatic problems and, in the worst-case scenario, could even start a war. He agreed with Willard's judgment and expressed how glad he was that Willard had ended his engagement with his sister. Willard thanked him and reaffirmed that he had made no mistake when he passed judgment on Remy that day. Meanwhile, Remilia stared ahead with wide, furious eyes. She was observing Willard and Claude's conversation through her spiders. After a brief pause, she burst into wild laughter. The discussion of crop rotation and the soup kitchen filled her with contempt, and she regarded their efforts as a source of amusement. Rising to her feet, she deployed the spiders once more before turning her thoughts toward Sophia, wondering how she was faring in the demon realm. The scene shifted to a vast mountain landscape where a crow flew overhead while 2 figures stood atop a massive rock. Remilia observed that Sophia appeared to be enjoying herself. She reviewed notes listing potato clovers, a turnip-like vegetable native to the demon realm, materials suitable for producing silk and paper, precious ores, mana stones, building stone, and materials obtained from monsters found only within the demon realm. She concluded that, as a noble with a keen eye for quality, Sophia had indeed been the ideal person to judge which goods would be valuable in the human realm. Standing with her hands resting on either side of a large basin of water, Remilia remarked that this left her with plenty of time to investigate all of the false accusations against her. She reflected that it would not be much longer before she could finally wrap her fingers around the throat of the filthy woman who had ruined everything. Chapter 15 began with a knock at the door while Angel sat inside, focused on his writing. After granting permission for the visitor to enter, Remilia stepped inside and asked whether it was a good time. Angel looked up in surprise at her arrival. When Remilia explained that there was something she wanted to discuss, he readily agreed. She laughed softly and thanked him. Some time later, the two walked together outdoors. Remilia asked whether there was magic capable of allowing someone to look into another person's memories. Angel replied that there was. He explained that, although human sorcery possessed no such spell, he had thought demon magic might offer something similar. Remilia recalled the time when the visitor had imposed a gag order regarding the true nature of the devils humans believed in and the subject of madness. Angel confirmed that this had been necessary because it represented the greatest threat in their dealings with humans. Remilia observed that the visitor had used contract magic that bound the soul, a form of magic only the Demon King could wield, and reasoned that memory manipulation might also be possible. Angel acknowledged that magic capable of interfering with memories did exist and could, in theory, be useful for investigating incidents and proving someone's innocence, but he strongly advised against using it. When Remilia questioned why, he explained that, unless compatibility between the caster and the target was exceptionally high, there was a serious risk of leaving the target mentally broken. The victim could become little more than an empty shell, and even for the sake of an investigation, Emmy would never choose such a method. Furthermore, there was a high probability that any results obtained through it would not even be accepted as valid evidence. Angel then assured Remilia that a far better spell existed. She reacted with surprise when he introduced it as the past water mirror. Remilia recalled Angel's explanation of the spell. The first step was to prepare a basin filled with water before determining the exact coordinates of the location whose memories she wished to observe. She also needed material information connected to both herself and the person she was investigating, along with crystal dust ground from a magic stone corresponding to how far back in time she intended to look. Standing before a wall covered in notes and diagrams while holding a set of scales, Remilia remembered Angel explaining that a familiar could be used to determine the exact location. She worked with the basin and the strand of hair that had been sent to her while considering the necessary material information. Using the scales of time and connection, she weighed the quality of the magic stone against the depth of the bond. The powdered magic stone was then poured into the hourglass. The higher the quality of the stone and the stronger the connection, the farther back the mirror could reveal an appropriate scene from the past. Angel had explained that this magic, known as album in the game, did not interfere with people but instead traced the memories of a location itself. While demons could protect their private spaces against such observation, those defenses were merely simple charms, making the spell effective in the human world. Remilia had reacted with surprise before expressing her gratitude to Angel. Angel then asked what Remilia intended to do after gathering the evidence. She replied that, if possible, she hoped to present it to the king. However, if he still refused to believe her or if the evidence were destroyed to protect the Star Maiden or the prince, she would have no recourse. She reflected that even her own parents had turned their backs on her, leaving her as nothing more than a powerless girl in noble society with no allies. Angel assured her that he would prepare the stage for the truth to be revealed so that she would have nothing to fear. He swore this as the king who would forge the alliance and promised to become Remilia's strongest supporter. Remilia was taken aback by his declaration. Inwardly, Angel thought that everything was proceeding exactly as planned and quietly celebrated his success. Angel then declared that he wanted to become a man worthy of standing beside Remilia. The two stood facing each other across the grassy field. Remilia gazed into the distance, her expression softening with emotion. She reflected that the reason she had been able to keep moving forward was because she wanted to stand beside Willard. She also wished to become a woman no one would ever be ashamed of. They remained together upon the open grassland, with towering mountains and drifting clouds stretching behind them. Filled with happiness, Remilia sincerely expressed her gratitude. She realized that this was her true and honest feeling. Whenever she experienced Emmy's emotions, she felt deeply fulfilled. The scene shifted to Remilia looking into the basin, where the images of two women facing one another swirled within the water. She watched with a sharp, focused gaze as she observed one of them. The scene shifted again, revealing the woman to be Pina. Remilia noted that Pina had been highly skilled at fabricating crimes. Meanwhile, Pina sought confirmation that no one else could testify to Lady Remilia of House Graupner being present at the scene. After confirming that someone had indeed witnessed Remilia striking her, she considered how she should proceed. A man remarked that he might have seen the Graupner heiress walking away around that time. Remilia observed that Pina had first asked whether anyone had witnessed the actual moment of the strike before deciding to lie once she confirmed that someone had. Pina explained that those who had seen Lady Remilia hurrying away had probably assumed they had witnessed her striking her. She further claimed that the hand had slapped her before wiping itself clean as though touching her had been filthy, after which the handkerchief had been thrown away. Naturally, no one had conveniently witnessed the exact moment of impact. Pina continued by stating that Lady Remilia had summoned her with a letter and that one of Remilia's maids could verify it. She then asked whether anyone had been able to see the courtyard from the hallway at that time. A male attendant sought confirmation that she wanted him to verify seeing her in the courtyard during that period. Pina affirmed this and then asked whether he had also seen Lady Remilia. Remilia observed that the attendant had decided to testify because he believed the maid was acting under royal orders. After consulting his family and concluding that cooperating with the Star Maiden would benefit them, he had gradually been persuaded into claiming that he had witnessed the slap. Even after later learning that there had been many other witnesses, he had never corrected his testimony. Some time later, Pina was approached by the son of Viscount Llafont. He confirmed that she was the Star Maiden before asking whether something had happened involving Lady Remilia of House Graupner. Pina presented a handkerchief, claiming that Lady Remilia had left it behind. Pointing to the embroidered crest, she stated that there was no doubt it belonged to Lady Remilia of House Graupner. Llafont confirmed that only Lady Remilia of the Graupner family was permitted to embroider that crest onto her belongings. Noticing that Pina had been kneeling on the ground, he asked whether something had happened. Pina held her swollen cheek and began to cry, insisting that it was nothing and explaining that, as someone originally born a commoner, she simply felt out of place among the nobles. Llafont then questioned why her cheek was swollen. Pina explained that, even though she had been given the rare opportunity to interact with the Crown Prince, it seemed Lady Remilia disliked that. She apologized for crying and called herself pathetic. Llafont declared that such behavior was unforgivable and stated that, if her account was true, he would serve as a witness. He urged her to report the incident immediately. As he turned to leave, Pina stopped him by pointing out that he had not actually witnessed what had happened. She explained that the handkerchief alone would not be enough to charge Lady Remilia, as they would simply claim there was insufficient evidence. Llafont attempted to argue, but Pina insisted that, if anyone questioned him later, he should only confirm the fact that the handkerchief belonged to Lady Remilia. Llafont instead declared that he had picked it up himself and preserved it as evidence. Pina asked whether that was truly acceptable. Llafont replied that, had he entered the courtyard only 3 steps earlier, she would have been the one to pick up the handkerchief lying before Miss Pina, while he would have crossed paths with Lady Remilia as she departed. Pina suddenly clung to his arm in gratitude. Llafont reflected that he thought he had seen someone with blonde hair earlier and remarked that women's jealousy was frightening. Since he had not actually witnessed the slap, he believed he was not lying and insisted that he had merely stated the facts. Remilia grasped the full situation. Every piece of false testimony had originated within the academy, meaning that by observing the academy grounds through the past water mirror, she could uncover exactly what had happened. She acknowledged that Pina's acting ability was truly remarkable and thought she might have been better suited to becoming an actress than the Star Maiden. Pina had fabricated both evidence and witnesses from absolutely nothing, and Remilia could not help but admit that such skill was extraordinary. Pina had successfully constructed the following narrative. Lady Remilia of House Graupner had struck the Star Maiden across the cheek in the courtyard, wiped her hand with a handkerchief in disgust, and thrown it away before leaving. From that single fabricated incident, Pina had created numerous pieces of supporting evidence. These included claims that guards had been waiting in the courtyard, a letter summoning Remilia there, a witness who had seen Remilia confronting Pina from the hallway, and someone who had picked up Remilia's discarded handkerchief. To any outsider, the combination of testimony and physical evidence appeared completely irrefutable. The maids and guards who had betrayed Remilia had stolen her belongings and delivered them to Pina. They had revealed the times when Remilia was alone and had knowingly assisted Pina in fabricating the crime. The thought that these people, along with those responsible for destroying Emmy and shattering the happiness of the villainous Remilia, would one day face judgment filled Remilia with twisted joy. She recognized that this was the path Emmy had chosen. Then Remilia suddenly realized something. She fixed an intent gaze upon the basin before her, her expression changing as understanding dawned. She concluded that dirtying her hands had been worthwhile, as it had granted her a far greater trump card than she had ever expected.